What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 5SW Chapter 121 Freya's Mind Sabaody Archipelago, what happened at the auction venue, caused a huge reaction from Marine. The accident of celestial dragons very close to naval headquarters is definitely Marine's dereliction of duty, and it will also mean that a bigger storm is coming.
Damn, we're all dragged down by that guy. Dare to shoot celestial dragons, I will not let him go in New World. Straw Hat Luffy. Bonnie gritted his teeth and roared.
Let's go, celestial dragons have an accident, Marine Admiral is coming.
Escape. This island has become hell for pirates. Marine is everywhere, searching our trails. All kinds of pirate groups on the street are already in a panic. The fluctuations caused by celestial dragons made the pirates tremble. On weekdays, Sabaody Archipelago is quiet, they can hide here, and nothing will happen. But when Marine is about to make a move, especially when Admiral is coming.
All that is different. The entire Sabaody Archipelago became a panic when the news spread. Whether it is a civilian or a pirate, they are all in tension and panic at this moment. Something happened to the celestial dragons, and Marijoy's wrath would overwhelm everything. The world government will not tolerate such a thing, let alone naval headquarters. For a time, the streets in various areas of Sabaody Archipelago became chaotic. Marijoy. What a terrible accident, I knew that this group of pirates would make a big deal. Sengoku slammed his fist on the table, his eyes dignified. He is now in Marijoy and is in a meeting with the world government about the next war. But the suddenness of this incident was obviously beyond everyone's expectations. Pluton Rayleigh, did you show up too? With John Lu blocking him, there should be no problem. Kizaru has also been dispatched. I hope this turmoil can be subsided as soon as possible, and it will not have any impact on the next war.
Sengoku said solemnly. In the face of Whitebeard, even if everyone in naval headquarters is brought out, it cannot be said that there will be 100% certainty.
11 supernovas are also a scourge, on the streets of Sabaody.
Behind Zhang Lu, the white cloak of justice trembled, with Zambo and Longbottom on the left and right, Freya following nervously. Sir, what should we do next? After Tianlong was beaten by the Straw Hat Boy Luffy, the tense atmosphere of the whole island was almost visible to the naked eye.
Advertisement: there are civilians fleeing everywhere, and the Marines on the street are almost endless, encountering one after another. And the battle with the pirates is also continuous. As a Marine, it's natural to catch pirates. Zhang Lu smiled lightly. Pay attention to any news from the headquarters about the 11 supernovae. Freya nodded. Yes, their stature zips through the streets when passing an alley. It's Marine, damn, these guys are so endless. I just avoided a group, and it's here again. A group of pirates hiding in the cracks said through gritted teeth. But there are only 4 people, why don't you go out and kill them, then break through and leave the island? The successive hiding made these pirates who were free and undisciplined on weekdays extremely aggrieved, and their emotions were almost suppressed to the extreme. Don't be impulsive and wait for them to pass, one of them said solemnly. Soon, the 4 John Lu had entered their field of vision.
Stand here, if you shoot, you can hit. The leader is just a colonel, head.
Go ahead. The pirates gritted their teeth, their eyes flickering. The man with the gun on his back pointed the gun at Zhang Lu and pressed his hand on the trigger.
The other pirates also pulled out their weapons, sweating nervously.
Colonel, Captain Pirate's eyes moved, and then there was a flash of ferocity, without hesitation. With the strength of their team, tackling a colonel should be quick. Go. The next second, he drank loudly. The moment the words came out, the pirate with the gun suddenly pulled the trigger. Boom. The small lead bullet rushed out of the muzzle in an instant and shot towards Zhang Lu's eyebrows. Kill! Inside the cracks, the hiding pirates also roared, and they were about to rush out and attack. But in the next second, their figures stagnated, and their eyes were full of incredible and shocking. How is this possible? The man who shot was shaking all over, and the captain's eyes widened. Advertisement: Zhang Lu turned around slowly, looked at the group of pirates in the crack of the house in front of him, and slowly raised his right hand. I saw that he was twisting a lead bullet between his index finger and thumb. What's even more outrageous is that this lead bullet, which was originally a spherical shape, has become twisted due to the huge force between his fingers. He caught the bullet with his hand, said the captain tremblingly. Compared with cutting with a long knife and avoiding bullets with the flesh, such a scene is obviously more shocking and also more frightening. Because, this means that the strength of the other party is unbelievably powerful. Hide well here, isn't it bad for the mice in the sewer? Do you have to shoot at me? Zhang Lu said lightly. He twisted the lead bullet with his fingers and made a catapult posture. You have a lot of murderous aura on you. Have you killed a lot of innocent people? Speaking lightly, the lead bullet in Zhang Lu's right hand popped out. Call out. Go to hell to repent of your filthy life.
Because, by his side, neither Garp, Zephyr, nor Sengoku can talk about even the slightest evil.
Along the way, Freya seemed very silent. Will you convict Marine? This group of more than a dozen pirates fell to the ground and lined up. Before they died, their eyes were still staring in horror, dazed, and shocking all kinds of incredible emotions. There are quite a few hidden pirates in the Sabaody Archipelago. Is Marine really righteous? Accompanied by the voice of the voice, the twisted lead bullets instantly penetrated the body of this group of pirates, carrying a large blood flower, and at the last moment, it hit the building, making a loud explosion, like an explosion of a cannonball. A lot of sparks. Suddenly, Freya's voice came from behind. John Lu understands this feeling very well. Back then, when he didn't experience that series of things and witnessed it with his own eyes, he also imagined that Marine was truly righteous. Turning around, John Lu said lightly, "Yes, sir." She was in a low mood, and she didn't want to talk much. Today's experience was too impactful for her, and it would even subvert her three views. Freya sighed. The big incident caused by the Straw Hat Boy led to these hidden mice. The reckless celestial dragons, the unimaginable human auction, the pirates who beat the celestial dragons, all kinds of things were put together, making her feel that her brain capacity was not enough. Peeved, some confused, some heavy. Chapter 122 I found you. Justice? Hearing this, John Lu laughed. Then, he gave an ambiguous answer. That depends on what justice means in your eyes. After a pause, he said again, everyone has their own justice in their hearts. Afterwards, John Lu grinned, seemingly mocking. Marine advertises justice, but ironically, this justice is in the service of some dark guy. So, do you think he is righteous? Freya. When Freya heard the words, her body trembled, and she became even more silent. She was a little confused. If Marine wasn't right, what was the point of her being here? To be able to sacrifice herself to be a Marine, she is of course a woman of faith. But at this moment, I suddenly discovered that this belief is actually distorted, skewed, and wrong. How can this kind of impact on the soul be done? I don't understand. Freya trembled. I don't understand either. John Lu laughed. But I know that you have your own purpose, sir, and there is no confusion in your eyes. Freya gritted her teeth. This sentence may be a bit direct, and it has already exposed itself and knows something. But she felt aggrieved and uncomfortable at the moment, and she couldn't vomit. Ha ha. John Lu smiled, looking at the empty and messy street ahead. His words suddenly sighed. That's because I know what to do. Freya was stunned, looked at the opponent's back, and then looked at the cloak of justice fluttering in the wind, and suddenly gritted her teeth. Can I come with you? The smile on John Lu's face did not disappear, but he asked indifferently, do you know what this means? I have no idea, but I want to chase true justice. Instead of letting the darkness happen, turning the blind eye, and even serving it. Freya said loudly, she was emotional, even sad, and tears welled up in her eyes. Such justice, it would make me feel ashamed. Yes, everything she saw at the auction venue, the celestial dragons that Marine maintained, had a shock to her heart. The beliefs that I once held have all collapsed. Today, she just wants to pursue real peace of mind. The man in front of her is very mysterious, but it can give her enough security. Yes, John Lu said softly, grinning. It seems that we are a very good team. Then let's go together. Freya was startled, then nodded. Then, they continued to search around. Advertisement. There are many pirates in Sabaody archipelago, and the number even exceeds the expectations of Marine. This time, not only the entire garrison on the island was dispatched, but also Marineford's support force. In order to clean these pirates, among them, the most important, the highest reward, and the most dangerous are naturally this batch of pirate supernovas. Sir, I just received a message from the headquarters, and received a message from the Hard Pirates, Trafalgar Law and his party. After a while, Freya said suddenly, really? Then go have a look. John Lu narrowed his eyes and smiled. On the other side, Aunt Xiao's ribbing bar. Is he actually a crew member of One Piece? The Straw Hat Boys looked at the elderly uncle in front of them with amazement. Luffy was even more shocked, his eyes widened and flashed. They had been here for a while, and Rayleigh arrived shortly after, and a little chat started. So, what about John Lu? Zoro asked suddenly. After that battle, he wanted to know more about the other side. Hearing John Lu, everyone present was startled, and then became solemn. There is no doubt that the brief battle at the auction house left a deep impression on them. Rolling combat, it can be said that there is no game experience. John Lu's strength made everyone tremble. The three main forces of the Straw Hat Pirates had no resistance against the man's speed, strength, and fists. You asked an interesting question. Rayleigh sighed suddenly. However, since Roger is mentioned, this man's name is destined to be avoided. At this moment, Robin suddenly made a sound. Her voice was unprecedentedly serious, solemn, and mixed with a touch of complexity. His name is Portgas D. Jong Lu. Hearing the surname, everyone was stunned, and then all looked at Luffy. Portgas? He actually has the same surname as Ace. Is it Big Brother? Luffy exclaimed in surprise. Rayleigh touched his nose speechlessly. How did Big Brother come to this result? He began to wonder if Shanks had made the right choice. Marine's predecessor Admiral, Day Tiger Jong Lu. 20 years ago, he was the Marine who crushed the entire pirate era, as famous as your grandfather hero Vice Admiral Garp. Robin said slowly. In O'Hara's first battle, he single-handedly defeated the current 3 Admiral. And in the same way, he once fought against the strongest man in the world, Whitebeard, several times, and chased after Roger, the Pirate King, the strongest Marine who ran all over the world. This remark also shocked the people present again. This is the first time they have learned about each other's identity and information in such a detailed manner. John Lu, Ace's uncle. At this time, Rayleigh said with emotion. This is also one of the reasons why he is reluctant to fight against each other. He is very aware of John Lu's attitude towards his only nephew. Advertisement when the two fight at this time, the impact will be very large. Such a battle was no less than Whitebeard's attack on Marineford. What? Is it uncle? It doesn't look like it at all. Luffy muttered in surprise. Once, the old man thought he disappeared into this world. After all, if something like that happens, the person who can still survive is probably the only one in this world. Rayleigh sighed. Robin, do you know him well? What did John Lu do? Is he a good guy or a bad guy? Nami asked curiously. In her cognition, John Lu is undoubtedly a very mysterious person. He, after the O'Hara incident, hit Marijoy, Robin said with a complicated expression. Is it good or bad? Muttering, she suddenly laughed. To me, he's the best person in the world. Rayleigh nodded with a smile. Although the camps are different, the two sides are opponents or even enemies. But even Roger still admires and respects John Lu, his brother-in-law. Everyone was shocked at this moment. Pick up Marijoy. What he did was even more shocking than what Luffy did. Usopp exclaimed. I can't imagine he's still alive now.
Sanji took a breath and exclaimed. So, what about his strength? Zoro asked. As John Lu's strength, 20 years ago, he was hailed as the most pervert monster-level genius ever.
Rayleigh laughed. On the other side, in a park that had just experienced a battle, there were many Marines lying about, screaming in pain. Luo, let's go. Marine is coming again soon, Beppo said in a low voice. Yeah, it's really annoying to avoid the pursuit of these guys. Luo nodded, picked up the long knife and was about to leave here. But in the next second, his pupils suddenly contracted. At the exit of the park, a figure suddenly appeared, and his eyes were locked on him. Trafalgar Law. Got you. Chapter 123. It's disappointing. R.O. Who is that guy? Beside Bebo's eyes widened, and he also saw John Lu and his party walking towards here. It's troublesome, I actually met him, Trafalgar Law said in a deep voice, his eyes were full of solemnity. As a pirate, the last thing you want to encounter is Marine Admiral, which will mean disaster. Luo, on the other hand, did not want to meet the legendary Marine. This is more desperate than meeting Admiral. Muttering, Luo clenched the long knife and was about to turn around and leave. If you can't beat him, run away. In the face of a character like the other party, running away is not shameful, but the wisest choice. However, he just moved. John Lu, who was still at the entrance of the park, stepped out, a few flickering strange figures, and stood 10 meters in front of him. Immediately, the atmosphere was silent, and an invisible pressure rushed to the face. Luo's footsteps slammed, his eyes gloomy, and his partner pulled out his weapon nervously and looked at Marine in front of him alertly. Trafalgar Law, supernova with a bounty of 200 million. Well, the generation that is hailed as extremely evil by the world sounds amazing. But why are you leaving when you see me? With a faint smile on his face, John Lu asked aloud. Luo's expression was solemn, and his right hand tightly held the hilt of the saber at his waist. I'm in a hurry. Oh, really? Then can I delay you for a while? Please go to a place. John Lu said with a smile on his face unchanged. Where? Luo Shen asked in a deep voice, impelled down. John Lu grinned. He was looking at the supernova in front of him, nicknamed Death Surgeon, who was also a very popular character in the original book. Of course, for him, he paid more attention to the relationship between the other party and the Corazon and Don Quixote families. Its fruit ability is Op Fruit, a very powerful ability that can be called the ability of the domain system. The capable person can create a global or hemispherical space, and in the space, they can cut, exchange, and splicing anything at will. Hoo-hoo. The strong wind blew and rolled up the dust on the ground, which also made the atmosphere of the scene more condensed, and there was a suffocating sense of depression. Luo was silent, the dignified expression on his face never dissipated, but the light in his eyes sharpened. I don't want to be your enemy, please let me go. Furthermore, it seems that a big man like you is a little out of status when you take action against a junior like me. The mysterious guy who has a close relationship with Corazon does not mean that he will be merciful to him. After wandering in the sea for so long, Luo naturally understands this truth. More often, he can only rely on himself and his companions. Oh, you seem to know me? This is fun? John Lu raised his eyebrows and said with a smile. Advertisement, former Marine Admiral, Day Tiger John Lu. Of course I know someone like you, Luo said aloud, his right hand suddenly stretched out and his fingers moved lightly. Room baton. A circle of ripples spread rapidly, shrouding John Lu in it, forming a hemispherical confined space. Very decisive. John Lu laughed. The solemnity in Luo's eyes never dissipated, and he pointed his finger at the sky. Boom. The stones on the ground, following his hook, all rolled towards John Lu who was standing on them. Is this what your Op Fruit is capable of? It was fun. John Lu looked at the rocks in front of him, in all directions, overwhelmingly bombarded at him, and grinned. The next second, he stepped forward, his eyes suddenly staring. Buzz. Conqueror's Haki roared out in an instant, crushing in all directions. The bombarded stones rolled back and rushed all around, and the violent Haki radiated out in a mighty manner. Luo, Bella and the others shrank their pupils, their bodies trembling. How is this going? My body was shaking involuntarily. With this momentum, I can't even move in the face of him. Shiki, Changbalu and the others cried out in fear. The man standing not far in front of them seemed to be surrounded by violent energy, and even the color of the half of the sky he was in seemed to have changed. Everything is twisting, everything is shaking. All the people in this momentum were completely crushed and suppressed. If you can't even bear this momentum, you are too weak. John Lu said lightly. In Luo's solemn eyes, he took a step forward. Come on. Let me see what the supernovas of this era are like. Crack. There were cracks on the surrounding walls and on the stone sculptures. Behind Luo, Beibo and the others' eyes were pale, their bodies were shaky, and they were almost unable to support them. Damn. Gritting his teeth, Luo suddenly moved his right finger again. Slaughterhouse. The fierce energy attacked Zhang Lu's body. Advertisement, but the ability that was almost invincible in the past was strangely ineffective when facing this man. The other party's head did not leave his neck, and his whole body was intact. How is this possible? Luo's eyes widened, sweat dripping from his forehead. His op fruit ability actually failed when facing this man. But the other side's footsteps are still moving. The terrifying coercion swept over, and there seemed to be traces of electric light in the void, and the wind whistled, blowing the big trees in the park. The overwhelming pressure made Luo's whole body tremble involuntarily. Pediatric tricks, low. Is your ability only so much? The faint voice came, and Luo's whole body was shocked. In the next second, his eyes slammed, and the ghost crying at his waist was suddenly pulled out, and Luo's figure suddenly rushed out. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Zhang Lu, with a knife in both hands. He jumped up and slashed towards the opponent. It's impossible that the gap is so big, Luo roared in his heart. Facing this man, the terrifying pressure made him go crazy. It is like a tall mountain, standing in front of you, no matter how you can cross it. The fruit's ability is invalid, and the only means left are to face and fight the opponent head-on. This was a knife that was wielded with all his strength, and it was also a knife that Luo risked his life. However, when the long knife reached the top of the opponent's head, the strong wind swept the opponent's black hair for a split second. Is this a supernova? A finger suddenly pierced the air and appeared in the path of the long knife. Is that all there is to it? What a disappointment. Boom. A series of voices came out, Luo gasped, and the knife in his hand was firmly blocked by one of the other's fingers.
Dang 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 dang. Zhang Lu sighed. He suddenly glared at the knife, and then waved the knife frantically.
I can't even raise the desire to draw a knife, it's so weak. Immediately afterwards, the opponent's fingers slashed like a knife. When, Luo's pupil shrank, and quickly raised the knife to resist. A terrifying force suddenly swept in, his mouth slightly opened, his arms trembled, and his body shot out like a cannonball. Luo was stunned, and an unbelievable light appeared in his eyes. As if the words to state the facts sounded, Luo's whole body trembled, and his heart was stinged at this moment. When the sound of gold and iron came out, Luo's knife stagnated in midair, and was firmly blocked by that ordinary index finger, unable to make an inch. Chapter 124. You can call me Corazon. Boom. The promenade of the park was knocked down by Luo, and gravel and dust were stirred up. When he got up, there were bloodstains all over his body, especially his two arms were shaking constantly, and it seemed that he couldn't even hold the knife tightly. Monster. After taking a deep breath, Luo gritted his teeth and spat out two words. Even with only his fingers, he completely defended his own demon sword ghost cry. If this kind of thing hadn't been experienced personally, who would dare to believe it? In the next second, his expression became solemn again. Because the figure stepped again, the ground seemed to be shortened at this moment, its figure flickered, teleported, and in the blink of an eye, it was in front of him again. Damn it, is this the end? Luo gritted his teeth and growled. In the face of such a monster-level powerhouse, he is already very clear about his ending. Raising his head suddenly, Luo shouted at his companions who were shaking their heads just after recovering from the shock. Everyone, run away now, I'll stop him. Such words made Zhang Lu laugh.
Hold me, a very confident declaration. His figure stepped forward, and the cloak of justice behind him swayed. Then try it. After one step at a time, the person had already arrived not far in front of Luo. Room. Luo roared loudly, without any reservations about the strength of his whole body. The cover of the hemisphere covers almost half of the park. Then he took a breath, his eyes were round, and his index finger moved towards the sky. Baton. Zhang Lu blinked and stopped, looking at the scene in front of him, the corners of his mouth curved. It's interesting. I saw that within half of the park, everything obeyed Luo's command at this moment. Huge stone pillars, huge stone sculptures, all rose from the ground and whizzed towards him. In an instant, in front of Zhang Lu was filled with a large number of intensive attacks that were about to bury him. Boom. Above the ground, sharp soil pillars rushed out, charging towards him. So, is this your power? R.O. Zhang Lu smiled lightly, and slowly raised his right foot. When it reaches a certain height, it suddenly kicks out. Tempest kick. Boom. Powerful slashes roared out, and the soil pillars that flew in smashed directly, sending dust flying all over the sky. The huge slash reached nearly 100 meters, and it hit the stone pillar and stone sculpture in front of it. Advertisement. There was an explosion, and the rocks splashed, all shattered. Then, the slashing trend continued, and it roared down towards Luo in front of him. Beppo, Shiki, Pekan, Qiangbalu, run. Don't be stunned. Seeing that his attack was shattered again, Luo pupil shrank and roared. Then, in the next second, he was overwhelmed by the slash, and with a bang, dust obscured his figure. Luo. Beppo shouted, a worried expression on his face. How many times can you block? Luo. In the field, Zhang Lu's voice sounded again. Run. Stop him while I can. Luo's trembling voice came. Beibo said in surprise, watching the smoke in front of him dissipate, and the figure of his own captain emerged. Very embarrassed, but still alive, this is undoubtedly a joyful thing. Come on, don't you want everyone to be buried together? Luo roared. Beibo and the others did not hesitate any longer, turned around and ran to the side. Zhonglu didn't care about these crew members, but stared at Luo, who was breathing heavily and covered in scars. Suddenly, he grinned, sacrificing yourself in exchange for the living space of your own captain. You are a person who values friendship. You look a bit like Corazon. The sudden words made Luo's eyes narrow, and the whole person froze there, staring at the man in front of him. The other party, do you know that you know Corazon? You should have learned my name from Corazon, right? Otherwise, the mere brat won't know about me. Zhonglu smiled lightly. The time of Impel Down was very boring. In a few limited contacts, he mentioned to me that he adopted an interesting kid. The name seems to be called Luo. His eyes fell on the embarrassed pirate in front of him, and he smiled again. Is that you? Luo took a deep breath, his mood seemed to be touched. Isn't he adopted by him? That guy. After trembling and uttering 4 words, Luo finally let out a long breath again, with a bit of choking in his tone. That guy is already dead. Zhonglu heard the words, but the smile on his face did not fade away. Yes, how could he possibly let Corazon die? Even if it really dies, with his ability, it can be awakened again. Advertisement. What's more, he didn't think that Doflamingo would really kill Corazon. This kind of crucial thing, Doflamingo did not mention, it naturally means that Corazon is still alive. It's just that what he's doing now, he didn't ask. However, what you should be more worried about at the moment is your situation, Luo. Even if you have Corazon's relationship, it will not change any difficult situation you are facing at the moment. Zhonglu smiled lightly. Impel Down, do you think you'll like it? Luo slowly raised his head and wiped the corner of his mouth. That kind of place, ghosts like it. Suddenly, he also grinned. After looking into the distance, he could no longer see the figures of Beibo and others, and Luo let out a light breath. Also, I don't think I will really be caught by you. After saying this, his right hand moved violently. Room. Scanning. Gently spit out these 2 words, Luo's body instantly appeared in another place. Another flash of effort is gone. Zhonglu was stunned, blinked, and then laughed. Did you escape in front of me? It's really fun. You can also call me Number 5, wearing a black robe, and the man beside him glanced around, and after seeing that no one was paying attention, they entered an inconspicuous workshop. Meanwhile, Sabaody Archipelago, Block 25, a secluded place. But in the next second, his knees were slightly bent, and his entire body jumped up like a cannonball, and suddenly it passed hundreds of meters. The person in charge of meeting you is me, Don Quixote Rocinante. Bingo, you got it right. Speaking lightly, Zhonglu's figure moved towards the place where Luo disappeared, and quickly chased away. Number 5 was stunned for a moment, then swept the surroundings, the room was abnormally quiet, and then thoughtfully asked, a fruit-capable person. But you underestimate me too much, Luo. This made Number 5 and his companions a little silent, and the guy seemed a little reckless. The lights in the room were brilliant, and a man with short blonde hair, a shirt full of peach hearts, a red kabuto hat, and clown makeup said casually, with a loud voice. The man laughed. You can call me Corazon. Come here. After a pause, Corazon grinned. Ha 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 ha. Don't worry, in my place, no matter how loud it is, you can't hear it outside. Ha 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 ha. Chapter 125 Reunion. Don Quixote. Hearing this surname, Number 5 and his companion looked at each other, and a ray of light flashed in their eyes. Ha ha ha. No need to guess, Brother Doflamingo is my big brother. Corazon said with a smile. Number 5 understood and nodded. Rob Lucci. He's Kaku. Corazon looked at the 2 of them and nodded. I know you, the CP organization of the former world government, but it's unfortunate, it has already been judged there. It's a good choice. Under Zhonglu Uncle's command, you can rest assured. Then, he held out his hand. Then we will be colleagues. If I am here, there will be no problem with the establishment of the intelligence organization. I'm a very professional spy. Rob Lucci narrowed his eyes slightly, then took off the coat and hat on his head, as did Kaku next to him, expressing his respect for each other. Then, next, it's troublesome. The next second, the 2 hands were clasped together. It also means that under Zhonglu, the intelligence organization is rapidly building up. On the other side, on the noisy and chaotic Sabaody Archipelago street. Whirring. Breathing heavily, Luo leaned his back against the wall of an alleyway, his arms were shaking, and his eyes were even more solemn. Are you chasing after death? What is a guy like him for? Muttered, Luo rested for a while, then flashed again and continued to escape from here. Pedestrians were in a hurry on the street, and the sound of artillery shells was endless. Battles are taking place everywhere, and marines and pirates are falling from time to time. In such chaos, it's easier for me to escape. With a flash of eyes, Luo walked away quickly. And just after he left, a figure fell from the air and landed heavily in the center of a group of pirates surrounded by marine. Boom. The clods flew, the ground cracked, and the pirates screamed and were shaken by the shock wave, rolling around, and the air wave lifted and rolled around. This marine, who surrounded this place, was immediately surprised. When the dust dissipated, Marine, headed by him, saw the figure in the field, and saluted immediately. Zhonglu Admiral, all marines, all standing upright and serious. Zhonglu didn't respond, but scratched his head and glanced around. Where did you run to? Actually forgot his fruit, he has the ability to transfer. The Marines looked serious, still standing upright, not caring at all about Zhonglu's attitude. You keep busy. Not here, where are you? Zhonglu waved his hand, stepped through the crowd, and walked further away. Yes, Zhonglu Admiral, please walk slowly. Marine exclaimed, with awe in his eyes. Before he knew it, Luo, who was running for his life in front of him, had come to a secluded and quiet place. Did you get rid of it? But still can't relax. That guy's ability and strength are unknown. I can't be his opponent, I can only escape. With a solemn expression, Luo walked forward. Advertisement. But when he stepped into the street ahead, he somehow felt that everything here was quieter than other places. This quiet atmosphere. Luo was startled for a moment, recalling the feeling of being in the box once. Inexplicably, his eyes became serious. The next second, a door not far ahead opened, and two figures wrapped in black robes walked out. Then, we will cooperate more in the future. Kaku said with a smile. No problem. We will be colleagues from now on. The people in the room said with a smile. Standing here with Luo, he couldn't see the man's face, and he could clearly perceive the mysterious and dangerous atmosphere of the two at the door. On the way to escape, you shouldn't be meddling. But, Luo's body trembled, the light in his eyes was even brighter, and even tears flashed out. This voice. He was in a trance for a while, and staggered towards the house. Rob Lucci turned sharply and stared at Luo sharply. Kaku pulled out the weapon from his waist, and his eyes were cold. His footsteps moved towards Luo. The identities and actions of himself and others are quite sensitive. Once exposed or discovered, there will be consequences in the eyes. Corazon in the room was also curious and stuck his head out to look outside. When he saw the figure walking towards here, he was stunned, and his mouth suddenly opened wide. Luo was shocked, his eyes showed excitement and excitement. R.O. Corazon exclaimed in surprise. Rob Lucci frowned. No. Corazon nodded excitedly. Kaku, who had come to Luo in front of him, paused, and the two knives in his hands disappeared in a flash. Goodbye then. Lucci glanced at Luo, his eyes flashed slightly, and he turned away. Soon, he was walking side by side with Kaku. That guy is the death surgeon with a bounty of 200 million, Trafalgar Law. Kaku said softly. Since Corazon knows him, he won't kill him. People from Brother Doflamingo should know the seriousness of the matter. Lucci faint Kaido. In the blink of an eye, the two figures had disappeared. The two did not hide these words at all, and Corazon and Luo naturally heard it. You're not dead yet, Luo said excitedly. Of course not dead. Corazon was also excited. You've grown so big. Afterwards, he dragged Luo in, and the door closed vigorously. But strangely, no sound came out. How will you be here? When they entered the room, the two faced each other, and they asked aloud in excitement. Advertisement. When I found out that the same question was asked, I laughed again. Who are they? They said they wanted to kill me. Luo Shuai's eyes narrowed slightly, and he asked in a deep voice. You better not know, they are all dangerous guys. Even if Dover faces them in person, he has to be quite cautious. Corazon laughed. Yes, Luo said softly. Obviously, Corazon also has some secrets. Then what about you? Why are you so embarrassed? Corazon asked. I was chased by Zhonglu. Luo took a breath and said solemnly. Zhonglu uncle. Corazon widened his eyes and said in amazement. Yes, it's him. Luo frowned. That's really tragic. Ha 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 ha. After Corazon was confirmed, he laughed. You just hide here, wait for the limelight to pass, and then leave the Sabaody archipelago. Luo nodded. At this moment, there is nothing he can do. And what he didn't expect was that he would meet Corazon here. The joy of this reunion relieved his originally heavy heart. Look at the situation outside. Corazon said. He opened the window of the room and lay there, looking out. Soon, he saw a place on the street, and a figure seemed to be walking slowly and quickly. It's him. Luo's face was solemn, and his heart was tense again. Don't show up. Leave it to me, Luo. Corazon said with a smile on his face, staring at the figure coming here. After a while, the other party approached, came to the window, and stood quietly. Looking for someone. Corazon pointed to the front. Zhonglu uncle can go and see. Corazon opened his mouth with a smile. Get out of here early. Hey, Zhonglu uncle, long time no see. Are you busy? Look for someone, maybe I can help. A pair of eyes stared at Corazon, the invisible pressure enveloped this small workshop, and Luo, who was hidden inside, almost stopped breathing. Corazon laughed. Complete the task, I will leave immediately. Zhonglu nodded, and then smiled. I'm old, but still this sloppy look. Corazon smiled and said, hee, got it. Zhonglu said. There are several people in the street ahead. Zhonglu said. Pirates. Zhonglu nodded and turned to leave. Chapter 126 A supernova with 1 foot. Seeing Zhonglu's back disappearing from view, Corazon glanced left and right again and pulled the window up sharply. Luo walked out slowly, his eyes solemn. Are you gone? Gone. Corazon smiled. I wasn't found. Luo asked suspiciously. To be able to chase all the way here, it is obvious that the other party has some inexplicable method to lock his tracks. Of course it was discovered. Corazon said loudly. Who do you think that person is? Luo, he is Zhonglu uncle. A little guy like you is too immature in front of him. Luo was silent, and then asked suspiciously, then why is he? He let you go, all because of my face. Stinky boy. Corazon laughed. So, what's the connection between the two of you? Luo's eyes narrowed and he asked in a deep voice. His subconscious mind told him that there was some unimaginable secret between this Zhonglu admiral and Corazon. Hearing this, Corazon was silent. These things, it's not time for you to know. Since you're a pirate, do it well, Luo. After a pause, he sighed softly with a complicated expression. Next, the times are going to run wild. What? Luo's eyes narrowed, and his heart was extremely dignified. He knows Corazon very well, and he can make the other party spit out such words so seriously. That must mean something terrible is about to happen. Meanwhile, the Sabaody archipelago, the block numbered 27. Call out. The slashing slash suddenly roared out, and a huge gulf appeared on the entire street. At the end of the road, there was a group of pirates who were crouching, spitting blood, and were seriously injured. At the other end of the block, Zhonglu slowly retracted his right foot. Sabaody archipelago, such a lively scene is really rare. Step forward, the cloak of justice behind you is blowing in the wind. Marines on both sides saw him approaching, all of them stood up straight with nervous expressions, and immediately saluted and shouted, Zhonglu Admiral. Zhonglu didn't respond, just waved his hand casually and continued to walk forward, his eyes scanning around. Corazon said there were some interesting pirates on this street. Where is it? Advertisement. The head slowly raised, and the eyes locked, a group of people on the top of a building. Found one. Zhonglu grinned. Well, there are several other breaths that should not be underestimated. Looks like you can have fun for a while. At the moment when his eyes locked, a group of pirates also changed color on the top of the building. Captain Bonnie, the marine who is not afraid of celestial dragons. They're calling him Admiral. Damn, is he Admiral too? But, I've never heard of such a character in marine. The pirate beside him was anxious and shouted nervously. Admiral, isn't he the world's greatest swordsman? Bonnie's pupils shrank, and one of his faces changed color. It seems that our understanding of him is still limited. Lying on the top floor, looking down at the figure walking into the block below, Bonnie's eyes were extremely solemn. Not far from her, a group of panicked marines kept screaming. Ah, they've all been turned into children. What kind of power is this? A lot of marine kids. In the next second, the expressions of Bonnie and the others suddenly changed again. That guy is flying. The pirate shouted, his eyes were full of horror. In the eyes of everyone, they saw Zhonglu jumping, stepping on the air and coming towards them quickly. The speed is extremely fast, and it is pulled into an arc in an instant. Run. We can't be this guy's opponent. Jewelry Bonnie yelled, turning to run. However, the next second, Zhonglu, who was in the air, grinned, his right foot suddenly slashed out, the void was cut, the wind howled, and a sharp slash emerged, coming towards them in an instant. Tempest kick. The simple marine six styles exploded with unimaginable power in Zhonglu's hands. Boom. With the sound of the explosion, the entire building cracked from the roof and was neatly cut in half. The place where Jewelry Bonnie and others were located collapsed, and a scream came out. This island is not a place for pirates to mess around. The faint voice spread out, and the pirates in other places on the street suddenly shrank their pupils, and their eyes were full of fear. Boom. A building with a height of about 5 or 6 stories was easily cut in half by Zhonglu's foot, twisting and collapsing down. In the chaos, a young girl jumped out of it, and was about to enter the alley. Advertisement. It's not that easy to escape in front of me. Zhonglu turned his eyes and looked down. When his feet stepped on it, cyclone and ripples appeared in the air, and his figure disappeared in an instant. Call out. When it reappeared, it was right in front of the girl's figure. Damn. Bonnie's figure stagnated, and he stopped his rushing figure abruptly, and looked at the man in front of him with solemn eyes. Marine big brother, it's so scary here, please help me, I'm so scared. Woo 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 woo. When she raised her head, her face was covered with tears, and she cried. Oh, Zhonglu grinned. Do you think I'm scary? The big pirate with a bounty of 140 million Bailey, Jewelry Bonnie. As soon as he called out the identity of the other party, Bonnie's expression did not change, and he still looked like he was about to cry. Woo 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 woo. People don't understand what you're talking about. Pirates are so scary, how could I be? When the words were about to end, the girl's figure suddenly swelled, and her face became more mature. She trembled and turned around. Jewelry Bonnie's eyes brightened. A terrifying force erupted in an instant, Jewelry Bonnie's back shook, and the whole person flew forward like a cannonball in an instant. However, just as her hand was about to touch, Zhonglu's figure flickered and disappeared. Success. Boom. A large number of buildings were broken by her, and there were more ruins on the street. Moreover, the so-called admiral in front of him seemed to be a great swordsman, and his sword was still unsheathed. The faint words rang in Bonnie's ears, causing her complexion to change drastically. The voice came from behind. The other party actually changed positions in an instant. Zhonglu was expressionless, raised his right foot, and kicked directly at the back of the woman in front of him. Boom. It's your turn. Slowly retracting his right foot, Zhonglu turned around and looked at a short man dressed as a mafia with a cigar in his mouth. Capone beige with a bounty of 138 million. You are too slow. Even if the other party recognizes his identity, a sudden attack may not give him time to react. His body jumped even more, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Zhonglu, and his right hand touched him. Chapter 127. Can't be my opponent. Call. Taking a deep breath, the cigar in Capone Bedge's mouth emitted thick smoke, curling up toward the sky. The atmosphere seemed a little serious, dignified, and suffocating. Even Capone Bedge, who is called the Godfather by people, has a feeling of tingling in his scalp at the moment when he witnesses the scene of solving a supernova pirate with one foot. What's more terrifying is that he doesn't even know who the guy in front of him is. In Marine, there is still such a terrifying combat power. How do you want to die? The faint voice came from the other party's mouth, which also caused Capone Bedge's eyes to move slightly. It's life and death if you haven't fought yet. What a rude thing to do, Marine. He took a cigar and said lightly. Immediately following the next second, his eyes suddenly sharpened. I'm not that little girl, as long as I stand here, I'm a strong city. As he spoke, countless gates appeared on his face, body, and clothes in the blink of an eye, and many shrunken figures pushed the cannons, shouting something, igniting the leads. Let's feel the liveliness of 10,000 cannons. Capone Bedge said coldly. Boom 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 boom. Suddenly, the deafening sound of artillery fire resounded, and the pitch-black shells rushed out roaringly, their eyes widening in the blink of an eye, and bombarded Zhonglu. Almost instantly, he was right in front of him. The distance between the two is only tens of meters. This distance is just within the range of the shell, and the accuracy is extremely high. Oh, Zhonglu raised his eyebrows and laughed. The next second, he took a step forward. Buzz. The void trembled at this moment, and with him as the center, the range of tens of meters seemed to have fallen into stillness. The cannonball stopped, and Capone Bedge froze there. Everything is paused at this moment. Only Zhonglu was moving. He stepped slowly and walked forward, a step of more than 10 meters. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Buzz. Everything resumed again, and the shells roared out, rushing farther, but Zhonglu had long since disappeared. Capone Bedge was silent, looking at the figure close at hand. He was a little dazed. Because he couldn't understand how the other party got past the dense cannonballs and came to him. As soon as a word was uttered, it stopped abruptly. Zhonglu's fist had already swung out, hitting his stomach hard. Advertisement. Crack. As if the sound of the wall shattered, cracks appeared on Capone Bedge's body, and blood oozes from the corner of his mouth. Boom. After a pause for a second or two, a dull voice came out, and the violent energy came out from behind Capone Bedge. Immediately afterwards, the mafia leader raised his head, looked at the man in front of him in disbelief and fear, and shot away. Boom. It still shot like a cannonball, slammed into the building behind it, knocked everything down, and cut a further distance on the ground, smashing a series of big trees, and just now there was a loud bang, splashing a large cloud of smoke, return to peace. Hiss. At this moment, countless people on the street who saw this scene took a deep breath, and their eyes were full of fear and shock. 2 consecutive pirates with bounties over 100 million, in front of him, can't even support one round. As that kind of physical power a monster? Or fruit ability? Whether it was a marine or a pirate, this moment was extremely shocking. Powerful as a monster. It looks like an ordinary human being, with a height of more than 2 meters and a body that is neither fat nor thin, but the power that erupts is extremely shocking. Hawkins, what should we do? Not far in front of Zhonglu, around a fountain, the pirates shivered and asked the man sitting there nervously. Fate has been messed up. Faced with this man, it is not advisable to run away. Hawkins looked at the card in front of him with a heavy tone. Before the arrival of the other party, he had calculated it, although it was very dangerous, but he should not die, and there was a chance of survival. However, when the other party suddenly appeared, everything was messed up. Wait here then, the crew cried out in a trembling voice. Hawkins was silent, and he didn't know what to do, but according to the hexagram, escaping was inevitable. Instead of running, there is still a ray of hope. Wait, the most common way for fate to work is to wait silently. Hawkins said softly, a pair of eyes full of solemnity, looking at the figure not far ahead. On this street, in addition to the 2 supernovas who were just defeated and him, there are other guys. They are all big pirates with a bounty of over 100 million. Maybe this group of people will have some way. On the other side, hidden in a building, he was staring at Apu below with wide eyes, his eyes flickering. This guy is really strong like a monster. Captain, are we going to escape? Before he finds us. The pirate behind him cried out in horror. Advertisement. Kick a supernova with one kick, blow up a mafia with one punch, and marine below, it's a nightmare for them. They have never seen such a guy since they went to sea. Escape. It's rare to encounter Admiral level 1s. Why not try it? App grinned. Saying that, he looked to the other side again. I saw a burly figure stepping out. With a loud roar, he pulled up the huge stone pillar not far away, and then roared and ran towards Zhonglu. Isn't this someone leading us? Almost all the supernovae have gathered here. On the street below, Zhonglu rolled his eyes, looked not far ahead, held a stone pillar in his hand, shouted loudly, and rushed towards the pirates who were running towards him. A bounty of 180 million strange monks, Euroj. After reading the other person's name, he smiled. Can't you find a good place to hide? Euroj grinned and ran wildly. He was already in front of him, and he swung the stone pillar in his hand and waved it towards Zhonglu. Tibetan. It's not my character. It's exactly what I want for a guy like you to be an opponent. Roaring, the huge stone pillar also came to Zhonglu in an instant. Whirring, whirring. The wind was blowing, and the dust on the ground was swept up. Are you newcomers so confident? Said lightly. Zhonglu jumped lightly, dodging the huge stone pillar. Immediately afterwards, his body sank, and the next second he was standing on the stone pillar. The world is so big, just a guy like you. Stepping on with both feet, Zhonglu stepped on the stone pillar and blinked his eyes and came to the other side. But still can't be my opponent. The words fell, and his body sank. Boom. Wan Jun's strength exploded at this moment, and the stone pillar in Yoroja's hand could no longer be lifted, and fell directly on the ground. Immediately afterwards, I saw Zhonglu slowly raise his leg, and his right foot rose to the top of his head. Then, suddenly cut down. Boom. This kick hit Yoroja's body, and the terrifying power instantly caused him to spurt blood and fly upside down. Damn, another instant kill. Chapter 128 He Can't Kill. Sabaody Archipelago, Block 27. The big tree engraved with the 27 GR number was broken and collapsed at this moment, and the Yoroj, who had been severely injured, lay gasping for breath, and the blood was flowing. The supernova with a bounty of hundreds of millions, known as one of the most evil generations, was crushed when he encountered the marine standing in the street. The entire street was silent at the moment, and even the slightest sound of breathing could not be heard. The shocking scenes one after another made everyone hold their breath. The invisible coercion enveloped the entire street solemnly, making people feel suffocated. Zhonglu Admiral, codenamed Day Tiger. As this his strength. The extremely vicious molecule known as a supernova, in front of him, was eliminated in the breath. The Marines said in shock, their eyes were already full of light. In the field, Zhonglu stood there quietly, with a casual expression on his face. In the eyes of outsiders, a supernova, which is extremely dangerous, seems to not even need seriousness in front of him. Suddenly, boom, across the street here, a dazzling light lit up, followed by a deafening explosion, followed by a vague scream. The Marines moved their eyes to the shining place. As Kizaru Admiral here, this movement, only that one can evoke it. In this case, isn't this area gathered an admiral and a legendary figure? All Marines were excited, with excited eyes. Admiral refers to Kizaru, and the legendary character is naturally the Day Tiger. On the contrary, Chi-Chi X Drake, who has been hiding silently in the dark, is now staring at Zhonglu in the scene with a solemn expression. Escape, Drake. Beside him, his companion said in a deep voice. There is no doubt that compared with Marines' excitement, all the pirates in this block are full of tension and solemnity. Don't act rashly, that man's perception of breath is quite keen. Even if it doesn't move, we might find out. If you move, you will only die faster. Drake said in a low voice. The crew was stunned and asked in confusion, you know him well. I used to admire him deeply. Drake's eyes were complicated and he said softly. Facing such a man, the most famous Marine in the previous era, all he could do was pray that the other party would show mercy when facing him and his crew. Any other redundant actions are self-defeating. The so-called extremely evil generation, 11 supernovas, is just a joke in front of the other party. That man once suppressed and killed a lot of supernovas. Advertisement. Damn, Marine's combat power is so terrifying. The crew member gritted his teeth and said with a worried expression on his face. At this moment, the sky suddenly brightened, and a golden light came from a distance, and in the blink of an eye, it reached the street not far ahead. Immediately afterwards, the golden light converged into a human form and appeared in front of Zhonglu. With you around, it seems that these terrifying guys can't make any trouble at all. Kizaru looked around and said with a surprised expression. Collapsing buildings, streets cut into chasms, and a messy forest not far away all showed the situation of the battle just now. So, what was the purpose of Sengoku sending you here? Zhonglu asked with a smile. I don't know either, alas. But with you here, I can relax a lot. Kizaru spreads his hands. The two were chatting like no one else was around, but the pirates around them couldn't hold back. This undefended and relaxed appearance is very likely to succeed if it is attacked. Captain Apu, let's go. There are already 2 admirals. The pirate, who was dodging aside, said nervously again in a low voice. Hold on. Apu narrowed his eyes and said solemnly. On the street below, the 2 figures were facing each other, still talking, looking kind and casual. However, Zhonglu Admiral, have you seen Zondao Wan? I'm looking for him, Kizaru asked with a smile. No, you might be able to look elsewhere. Zhonglu smiled lightly. Yes, then I'll go first. Kizaru smiled and glanced around from the corner of his eyes. The position I saw at this glance happened to be Apu, Drake, Hawkins and others who were hiding on the side. They're all scary guys. After speaking, golden light shone from his body, and the next second he rose into the sky and disappeared into the distance. This is the moment, Apu suddenly said sharply. A unique musical sound came out of his mouth, and his head and ears turned into musical instruments. It jumped to the roof of the building, and sent attacking sound waves towards Zhonglu. Scrap the disc, burst. Advertisement. The invisible attack came to Zhonglu in an instant, and the flames exploded with a bang. The marine figure in the field, his head, and his body were all burning, wrapped in smoke, and he couldn't see his appearance clearly. This sudden scene also made many people's eyes widen in shock. Yo, it worked. Apu laughed. Drake's eyes moved, staring at the figure in the field. Drake, is that guy defeated? The crew next to him asked loudly. It won't be so easy. Zhonglu, you can't kill me. Drake said solemnly. Sure enough, the next second, a shocking scene appeared again. I saw the flames burning on Zhonglu's body, and the smoke slowly disappeared, revealing one of them, his wounded, burnt face, and his body full of potholes. It's a good chance to grasp it. The faint laughter came out, but it gave people a cold feeling, which made people shudder. Because everyone can see that Zhonglu, who has scars all over his body, the scars on his body returned to their original shape in just a few breaths. Even the clothes on his body were completely unscathed. How can that be? Is he Logia? Apu was shocked, and turned to flee. It's Paramesha, Drake said solemnly, answering the doubts of the crew next to him. In the next second, Zhonglu, who was standing there, disappeared. Then, it's my turn. The voice sounded from the top of Apu's head, causing his body to tremble, and the color of fear appeared in his pupils. Boom. Immediately after, the sound of the earthquake sounded, Apu's body was slammed down, and the building under him collapsed, turning into a ruin, and burying it in the blink of an eye. Afterwards, Zhonglu jumped high and ran on top of the buildings. He's coming our way, Drake. A trembling, terrified voice came. Drake's mouth moved, silent. Almost the next second, a figure came to them, accompanied by that terrifying, heavy pressure. Long time no see, Drake. Zhonglu grinned. Chapter 129 Calculate your destiny today. Zhonglu. A low voice came from Drake's mouth, his eyes were fixed on the man in front of him, and his entire body was instantly on alert. Marine really released an amazing guy. He sighed lightly, his eyes already sharp. Although they were both Marines, and even the two were in the same period, the vicissitudes of life have changed, and it is a different scene to meet again now. The hostility is very heavy. It's a pity to hear that you are a pirate. Zhonglu smiled and shook his head, stepped forward, and walked towards the group of pirates in front of him. Maybe, this is also a choice for me, Drake said solemnly. As the man in front of him approached, a mountain-like pressure also swept in, making him and the crew members beside him nervous. I hope you can survive in my hands. The faint voice came out, and Zhonglu's figure suddenly swayed. The white cloak of justice trembled, the wind suddenly became louder, and its figure disappeared from the eyes of Drake and others in an instant. Gone. Drake's pupils contracted, and his body changed rapidly, becoming a hideous dinosaur. However, in the next second, a figure reached the top of his head. It looks like a monster. Drake. Zhonglu laughed. You're more of a monster than me, Drake said coldly, and swung his claws into the air sharply. Zhonglu, who was in the air, kicked out his right foot easily. Boom. The seemingly soft kick collided with the dinosaur claw, but it made a dull crashing sound. The huge dinosaur body made a clear mark on the ground, and slammed into the wall on one side, and suddenly appeared. A collapsed area. What a terrifying power, the captain's animal form, can't even compete. The crew of the Drake pirates widened their eyes in horror. Call. Drake took a deep breath, his face dignified. The opponent's random shot, but he has to deal with it with all his strength. This is the terrifying power of the former Marine Admiral. What's even more terrifying is that the other party already had this kind of strength 20 years ago. After becoming a pirate, your strength doesn't seem to have progressed. Zhonglu smiled lightly. Advertisement. His footsteps stepped on the ground one after another, and after a flash, he appeared in front of Drake again. At this time, the rest of the Drake pirates also gathered up their courage and drew their swords. We're here to help you. Captain Drake, you are no match for him alone. With the loud shout, Zhonglu's surroundings were instantly filled with attacks. Oh, he tilted his head slightly, and the corners of his mouth cracked into an arc. It's a little over the top, your subordinate. As soon as the voice fell, his right foot suddenly kicked out and went straight to the pirates who were charging. Tempest kick. A slash was drawn in the air, it swelled and became bigger, and then slammed into the Drake pirate crew. In an instant, it was a crowd of people turning their backs, and all the people who rushed over flew out. However, the slashing still did not stop, and it slammed into the wall of the building ahead. Buzz. The huge building was slanted and cut at the waist, and collapsed down with a rumble. It's still such an exaggerated force. You guy, you are the most pervert monster. Derek said solemnly. He is very clear that with his own strength, he is not the opponent's opponent at all. But suddenly encountered at this moment, but there is no escape, there is no way but to face it bravely. Roar. His face turned hideous and frantic, and Drake roared again and charged up. The mood is good, Zhonglu murmured, dodging the opponent's impact and kicking out, hitting his abdomen. The terrifying force made Drake's dinosaur abdomen sink and tremble. From his mouth, a large mouthful of blood spurted out. Time seemed to pause for a moment, and just after a breath, with a bang, its dinosaur body flew out high, smashed a series of buildings, wiped the ground and swept out thousands of meters before it stopped. Cough, cough, cough. Drake vomited blood and regained his human form, the bones in his body seemed to be shattered by the foot. Some people became admiral, famous for hockey, physical art, and some for Logia fruit power. But this guy alone is famous for being human. A mere human body, but it perverts like a monster. Whether it's strength, speed, or responsiveness, it's already beyond the realm of ordinary people. Just a real monster. Drake's eyes flickered, shock in his eyes. Advertisement. This was also the first time he had a head-on collision with the opponent. Although he was a colleague, he had never played against each other. Marine put him out again. Is it for the next war? Yes, he is indeed the most suitable opponent for Whitebeard. But I'm afraid, Marine will also be at great risk. Drake gasped, and a train of thoughts rushed out of his mind, brightening his eyes. He definitely has huge ambitions. Call. The wind was blowing, and Drake's robe was blown, and he staggered to his feet, then turned and ran. Fortunately, the other party didn't seem to continue to shoot at him, but turned around and walked towards the fountain at the end of the street. A few steps later, Zhonglu was already standing in front of the fountain. The spring water is gurgling, and the water flowers change patterns and spray away to the sky. Different from the ruins in other places, there is a mess and screams, but it seems very quiet here. On the edge of the pool surrounded by a circle, sat a blonde, slender man with a melancholy expression. The other pirates stared at him and shivered. The magician with a bounty of 249 million Baileys, Basil Hawkins. Why don't you run away? Looking down at the man in front of him, Zhonglu asked curiously with a wink. Fate cannot be escaped, it can only be faced. Basil Hawkins raised his head, and there was no other expression on his numb and melancholy face. I don't have any interest in your mysterious things. Zhonglu smiled and shook his head. His eyes flashed, and he suddenly became interested. I heard that you can do divination, since fate is so persistent. Why don't you think about whether you will die today? Hawkins was silent. This was an inexplicable answer, and it was inevitable. Because of the initiative, the master is in the opponent's hands. What, doesn't it count? Zhonglu smiled lightly. He stood there casually, but the sense of oppression that spread out made all the pirates tremble. Fate seems to have no effect on people like you. After a long while, Hawkins raised his head and sighed softly. Hearing this, Zhonglu grinned. I appreciate your wit. Chapter 130 Just play with you. Then, his figure flashed, and he was in front of Hawkins in an instant. Hawkins' eyes froze, and he didn't move. Before such an action, he couldn't make any effective avoidance response. Zhonglu's right index finger slowly stretched out, pointed it at his forehead, and flicked it lightly. Boom. The body of Hawkins sitting there, shot out, breaking the stone pillar in the center of the fountain, smashing a series of buildings behind it, and stirring up the sky. Just spare your life. The faint voice drifted away, and when the pirates reacted, Zhonglu had already stepped out of the field. Hiss. Taking a deep breath, the rest of the pirates trembled in their hearts, and at the same time had a feeling of the rest of their lives. In the face of such a terrifying guy, even if the other party does nothing, they have a feeling of breathless depression. Terrible. This is the ex-Marine Admiral. Day Tiger, Zhonglu. At this moment, the simple name is deeply imprinted in the hearts of the pirates, which will leave a shadow for them for a lifetime. I want to go home. There's a guy like that in the Marine, it's scary and scary. I miss my family, my parents. Even after seeing this scene, some people have cut off the idea of becoming a pirate. The other side. Walking in the streets of the major blocks, Zhonglu's attitude is very casual, and the battle with the supernova has allowed him to solve the boring life of the previous period. At the same time, I also roughly understood the power of pirates in today's era. The era of the great pirates. The newcomer does seem to be stronger than that era. An arc appeared on the corner of his mouth, Zhonglu muttered. Greater intensity also means that the times are running fast, and Marine's pressure is greater. Because obviously, unlike 20 years ago, the number of pirates in this era is even greater. They are all guys with great potential, although they are still not on the table. But after a period of experience, you can make a name for yourself in New World. His eyes flickered slightly, Zhonglu said softly. He didn't kill him. The stronger these potential pirates, the more chaos they would create in the world, the better it would be for him. Blue blue blue. Suddenly, the phone bug in his arms rang. Zhonglu took it out, connected it, and the phone bug turned into a charming ponytail. Freya, advertisement. Is there anything to report? Said with a smile, Zhonglu stopped there. Sir, there is indeed one thing. Kizaru Admiral has come to Sabaody Archipelago. Freya's voice came. I know, we just met not long ago. Saying that, Zhonglu's eyes looked straight ahead, on the roof of a building, his eyes narrowed slightly, and a mocking smile appeared in his eyes. A group of pirates pushed the artillery with a grim face and aimed the muzzle at him. It's the first thing. We also found traces of the straw hats. Freya said again. Oh, that's good news. Tell me where they are. Zhonglu laughed. As long as he knows where the straw hats are, he can force Rayleigh to fight. And this time, there was no reason to stop him. Freya was about to speak, but suddenly heard a harsh whistling sound from the phone number on the other side. This voice, are you fighting? She couldn't help but lift her heart. It doesn't count, it's just a few mice. Zhonglu said lightly. In his eyes, he could clearly see the excitement of the group of pirates on the opposite roof. They seemed to be happy that the shells would hit next. But unfortunately, the result will probably disappoint them. The pitch-black cannonball drew a parabola, and soon it was in front of him. At this moment, Zhonglu raised his leg and touched the cannonball with his right foot, and then rubbed it lightly. Buzz. The void shook, the terrifying friction, the twisting force turned, and the path of the projectile's forward charge was instantly changed. Like a boomerang, it circled around his body, and there was a whistling sound again, and it was flying towards the pirates. Place to go. Ah, how is this possible? That guy changed the direction of the cannonball. Damn, the cannonballs are back. Indistinctly, panicked screams of fear came over, and after a breath, with a bang, everything was calm again. Zhonglu looked back and smiled again at the phone bug. Tell me, where are the straw hats? Freya quickly reported a location and said again. Advertisement. Kizaru Admiral may have gone there too. Because the trace of the straw hat boy was discovered by his subordinate Zon Taomaru. Zhonglu nodded thoughtfully and smiled again. Learn. Then, he stepped again, a step of tens of meters. This strange way of moving also shocked many people who saw it. The distance on the ground seemed to have been shortened by him, and it was as small as the legendary one. In fact, this is just a variant of the 6-style shaving, and it is also the most suitable way for people with physical quality like Zhonglu to use. After a while, when Zhonglu walked through a block, a figure with a grinning smile suddenly appeared in front of him. Next to him was a group of pirates with equally cold faces and solemn eyes. Supernova with a bounty of 315 million. Eustace Kid. Zhonglu's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at each other. This group of guys who suddenly appeared as the Kid Pirates, one of the supernovas. Dare to stand in front of me, you are very courageous. After a pause, he sneered again. Of course, your ignorant and stupid ambitions may be the culprit. They weren't stupid enough to have a man go it alone against a legendary admiral. Do it, you seem to be famous in Marine, just like that old man with glasses is in Pirates. In an instant, the entire Kid Pirates group moved. The momentum is very strong. With a cavity of blood and ignorant stupidity, you can only die faster than others. Eustace Kid stared at him, smiling as well, but the ambition in his eyes was clearly visible. A guy like you will have a more sense of accomplishment when you kill him. Kid exclaimed. Zhonglu shook his head and continued to walk forward. As he spoke, his right hand suddenly raised, and his expression became crazy. Seeing him move, Kid suddenly roared. Then let's play with you. Muttering, Zhonglu pressed his right hand on the handle of the knife at his waist. The magnetic fruit activated instantly, covering a distance of several hundred meters. In an instant, a large number of metal products flew from all directions and condensed on its right arm to form a huge mechanical arm. Hira, who was holding a sickle, moved quickly and drew a phantom on the ground. In an instant, it came to the top of Zhonglu's head, let out a weird laugh, and then waved it down. If you don't realize how big this world is, you won't be able to live for long. Pirates without ambition can't achieve great things. Chapter 131 Leaving an Arm. Choke. The piercing sound of the sword sounded, and the sky seemed to be lit up with brilliant sword light at this moment, shaking everyone in a trance. Hira swung the scythe down suddenly. But the next second, his weapon was firmly blocked in the air, and even his body was frozen there. More practice. With such power, you can't even hold a knife. Zhonglu grinned and said with a smile. The voice fell, and the long knife in his hand shook gently, and the majestic force rushed towards Kira in an instant, shaking on his hands. What? Kira's pupils shrank, and a terrifying power spread, causing his arms to tremble, and the sickle in his hand involuntarily came out. Even before he had time to react, his body was already flying high, and he didn't react until he broke the big trees. Kira. Eustace Kid's expression changed suddenly. He didn't expect that just a collision, the powerful Kira was directly knocked into the air, and he didn't have the ability to resist at all. A pair of eyes, looking at the eyes of the man in front of him, has become extremely dignified and even nervous. Perhaps, he seriously underestimated the strength of the other party. His eyes flashed, and he saw that his partner had run around to Zhonglu's side, his mouth opened and he spit out suddenly. Call. The hot flame rushed out in an instant, rolling fire waves, and engulfed Zhonglu. You zombie, it's interesting. Zhonglu turned his head and saw that the flame was about to reach in front of him. The long knife in his hand shook and slashed out flatly. Buzz. Under this slash, the air was cut, and a terrifying slash erupted, instantly destroying the sprayed flames. Then, slammed into Hit. Get out of the way, Hit. Kid roared, striding to the top of Zhonglu's head, holding the giant mechanical arm in his right hand, clenching it into a fist, and waving it down. The cooperation is very tacit. But unfortunately, it didn't work for me. Zhonglu turned the long knife in his hand and slashed toward the giant mechanical arm in the sky. On the other side, Hit rolled and crawled to avoid the slash, but was shocked to see that the buildings and trees behind him were all cut in half by this knife. Moreover, the slashing trend has not diminished, and it has spread over 1,000 kilometers before it gradually fades away. Such a slash. Hit was shocked. Immediately afterwards, as if he felt something, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Kid who was comparing with Zhonglu in front of him. Kid boss. At the same instant, on Zhonglu's long knife, a faint light flashed, and the blade cut through the air and slowly chopped down. Advertisement. As a reward for your courage to shoot at me. Just break your hand. A faint voice came out. Kid's pupils contracted. In the next second, he felt that the giant mechanical arm on his right arm was disintegrated, and a large piece of metal fell. At the same time, a long knife appeared strangely in front of him, slashing towards his arm with great precision. At this moment, Kid was stunned. He couldn't even understand how the other party's knife appeared in front of him, nor how the other party's figure cut into his front. Come on, he can't see clearly with the naked eye. Shish. The long knife was swung out, Kid's left arm suddenly numb, followed by severe pain, and a large amount of blood was thrown out. An arm was also thrown high, and then fell heavily to the ground. The pupils contracted, and fear flashed in Kid's eyes. In the blink of an eye, one of his arms was left here. What? Severe pain hit, blood fell down, Kid screamed and covered his left arm, his whole body was shaking. You're still too young. Boy, it's my kindness to you that I don't kill you. You should be grateful. This arm is the price you pay for learning to fear. Zhonglu withdrew the knife and said lightly. Kid's mouth trembled, trying to say something, but the pain and shock made him unable to say a word. Before he experienced it, he would never have imagined that one day he would tremble to stiffness. It is even more unimaginable that there are such powerful, terrifying characters in the world. Until Zhonglu left, Kira, Hid and others came to him. Kid. Hearing the sound, Kid raised his head, gritted his teeth and endured the pain. Is this the world's top power? With a trembling voice, Kid has fear deep in his eyes, but also has greater ambitions. It's really desperately powerful, at the same time. In the forest in the big woods, on the green grass, a group of people are in a panic of despair and fear. Admiral Kizaru. Nami trembled, looking at the golden figure not far ahead. This is the third admiral level figure they have seen, the first is Aokiji, the second is Zhonglu, and the third is the guy in front of him. Every admiral will bring absolute fear and enormous pressure. That despairing feeling of oppression and suffocation is like destroying all hope, making people unable to find any courage to resist. At this moment, their companions were trampled on by each other. The right foot, which was shining with golden light, was slowly falling, and it would kick Zoro heavily in the next second. And the power of this kick, everyone present has just seen it with their own eyes, can easily blow up a mountain. Zoro, Usopp and the others shouted anxiously and kept attacking Kizaru. Advertisement. Not far from them, red light flashed in his eyes, and the huge Bartholomew Bear was stepping forward. Straw Hat Crew is in its greatest despair yet. Helpless, without a glimmer of hope, he can only watch his companions in crisis, but cannot save them. It's useless. Suddenly, Kizaru stepped down with his right foot. At this moment, a figure rushed over and kicked. Call out. The golden light was kicked away by this kick and bombarded the ground on one side, blasting dust and flames all over the sky. Oh, is it your turn to play? Pluton Rayleigh. Casual words came out of Kizaru's mouth, and his eyes were also fixed on the man in front of him. Don't pluck the buds, their era has just begun. Rayleigh said with a light smile. I often hear that you are on this island, but I didn't expect that you would actually protect these yellow-haired boys. Even if you rot, are you still a pirate? Mr. Rayleigh. Kizaru said lightly. If you are willing to revoke the bounty, I can retire in peace. Rayleigh rode. The crimes of the pirates cannot be undone, let alone the Roger Pirates. Just to start a war with you, we have to make full mental preparations first. Kizaru said. Suddenly his eyes narrowed, and he said after a pause. However, I can't predict what the guy on this island will do when he sees you. With a smile in his eyes, he said lightly. It's unbelievable that you are willing to expose your position again for these yellow-haired boys. Hearing this, Rayleigh's expression became solemn. Always give the younger generation time to grow up. Even if you pay some price, it's worth it. Kizaru laughed. He should be here soon. It would be troublesome for me to fight with you, but if it were him. Squinting his eyes, he stared at the old man in front of him. It should be exciting. Suddenly, the expressions of the two people who were talking changed, and they turned to look at the jungle. I saw a figure wearing a cloak of justice with a knife on his waist stepping forward. It's here. Now, how do you decide? Pluton Rayleigh. Kizaru laughed. Chapter 132 Where do you want to go if you travel? Snapped. At the top of the tree, the constantly rising air bubbles cracked, and there was a sound of shattering. Rayleigh's expression also became solemn and serious at this moment, his eyes staring at the man who was walking here step by step, like a teleportation. Zhonglu. His eyes wandered, and he glanced at the Straw Hat Boy and the others, his heart heavy. It's Zhonglu, Usopp exclaimed. The Straw Hats, who had just escaped from Kizaru, were nervous and scared again. It's that uncle. Luffy raised his head with a serious look on his face. Directly across from him, Zontaomaru was holding an axe in his hand. Looking at the figure walking towards him, he couldn't help but tremble and become nervous. It's him, that legendary marine. With a trembling voice, Zontaomaru didn't care about Luffy at this time, and his eyes were fixed on the walking figure. Bartholomew Bear. A red light flashed in his eyes, the speed under his feet seemed to increase, and he walked towards the Straw Hat Boys. Call out. The next second, a laser beam shot out of his eyes, bombarding the crowd. Bear. 2 Admiral, 1 Shichibukai. Such a situation. Chopper, Nami, Brook and others were all shivering. At this moment, such a battle is a desperate situation for them. Even with Uncle Rayleigh, can he hold the 2 admirals? Nami said with a trembling voice. No one responded to her words, because such a question really hits the soul directly, and this situation is the most dangerous moment. Buzz. Suddenly, as the figure entered the field, he stepped. An invisible hockey burst out in an instant, and the mighty rolled towards the place where they were indiscriminately. Buzz. Another step. The figure approached quickly, as if teleporting. Zontaomaru was stiff all over, looking at the man who had arrived in front of him at an unknown time, trembling nervously. Are you that kid named Zontaomaru? Zhonglu looked indifferent and glanced at the man in front of him. Yes, Zhonglu Admiral. Zontaomaru said loudly. I heard that your mouth is very strict. Zhonglu said again. Yes, lousy. No, I and Taomaru are the strictest man in Marine. As soon as Zon Taomaru opened his mouth, he trembled again and bowed politely. Advertisement. Then keep it going. Zhonglu smiled and took another step. Buzz. The invisible hockey swept out again, waving to where Rayleigh and others were, setting off layers of ripples in the void. Crack. The affected trees were trembling slightly, and there were lines on the tree. What a domineering guy. Reminds me of the hot-blooded years. Rayleigh's eyes, condensed on Zhonglu, muttered. At this time, Zhonglu was already beside the bear. Let them go. A low mosquito-like sound entered Zhonglu's ears. Zhonglu paused in his footsteps, glanced at the Straw Hat Boys and grinned suddenly. It shouldn't be a big problem to hand them over to you, right? Bartholomew Bear. Shang was slightly startled, a light flashed in his eyes, and nodded. Yes. Then, he saw the man in front of him take another step, disappeared, and walked towards Rayleigh, where Kizaru was. I owe you a favor. But I may not be able to repay you for this favor. Bartholomew Shang said softly, stepped on his footsteps, and walked towards the flustered Straw Hat Boys. Goodbye, this world. The sound was very low, and it dissipated with the wind after the exit, and no one heard it. Now, how are you feeling? Pluton Rayleigh, Kizaru said with a light smile. Zhonglu's speed seemed to be slow and fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was more than 100 meters in front of them, and he was already in front of them after a few steps. Meet again, Rayleigh. As I said, you can't escape. Zhonglu smiled lightly. Are you two going to take action together to deal with this old man like me? Rayleigh's eyes were solemn, and he suddenly smiled. If there is a real chance to arrest a guy like you, that would be a great achievement. Kizaru laughed, pulling his hands, and a golden lightsaber emerged. Tiancong Cloud Sword. Rayleigh narrowed his eyes and stared at Zhonglu, but the latter didn't say a word and seemed to acquiesce to such a confrontation. I really can't guess you, Zhonglu. I thought you would be one-on-one with me. Zhonglu grinned, his eyes widened, and his fighting spirit rose. Kizaru. This battle, please watch it by the side. Kizaru was stunned for a moment, his eyes flashing slightly. Then, I will arrest these yellow-haired boys. Advertisement. No, Bartholomew Bear will take care of them. Zhonglu said again. You can just watch the show. Hearing this, Kizaru's eyes narrowed slightly. A bear. Did he actually listen to you? I'm in charge of Shichibukai too, isn't it? Zhonglu said lightly. Kizaru was silent. It was good that the other party was in charge of Shichibukai affairs, but it was not the other party's responsibility to order or control Shichibukai. What a neat excuse. He moved his mouth and wanted to say something, but suddenly his eyes narrowed and he quickly retreated. Hoo-hoo. The wind suddenly rolled, and the wind blade cut down, cutting out the traces where he was standing. Immediately after, a black robe shrouded in an indistinct figure emerged, standing in front of Kizaru, with his back to Zhonglu. If the two of you want to fight, you can fight. However, one-on-one is the fairest battle. The low words sounded, and suddenly above the sky, the wind was surging, the dark clouds gathered, and the lightning was also staggered. Boom. The sound of thunder resounded, and the sound of the wind suddenly became louder at this moment, blowing everyone's robes. Everyone's eyes were also focused on the man who suddenly appeared. Another one. Who is he? Cried Usopp. Luffy's eyes widened, looking at the figure shrouded in black robes and blocking Kizaru, his complexion changed, feeling inexplicably familiar. Bartholomew Bear was expressionless and took a few steps to Zoro. You're not dead, Roronoa Zoro. The latter looked solemn, looked at the tall figure in front of him, and recalled a scene that was not a good one. Ah, I'm lucky. It's not that easy to die. Zoro gritted his teeth, holding 3 knives, staring at the tall figure in front of him. The terrifying oppressive force rolled over, causing the sweat on his forehead and face to seep continuously. So, if you travel, where do you want to go? Bear said lightly. Looking down at the man in front of him, he was thinking and deciding where to send him. What? Zoro was startled. Shang took a step and was already in front of him. He patted it with his right palm and reached the top of Zoro's head in an instant. The latter didn't even have time to react before being photographed. Boom. Zoro snapped, shattered like a bubble, and disappeared. Just there, in the air, the bear's voice slowly dissipated. He turned around and walked towards the other person. Chapter 133 World War. Zoro. Fear, panic, and confused screams shattered the tranquility at this moment and echoed in this forest. All the people of Straw Hat Crew were trembling at this time. Zhonglu, save us, Robin said in a trembling voice, staring at the figure standing in front of Rayleigh in the field. But the latter did not react at all, as if turning a blind eye to all this. Boom. With another sound, Brooke, who rushed forward, disappeared into the air, accompanied by a popping sound of bubbles breaking. And then, Chopper. Familiar companions disappeared in front of him like this, making their hearts tremble and clump together. Desperate screams resounded at this moment. I didn't expect that you would appear at this time. Is it for my son? Dragon. Holding the Tiancong Cloud Sword, Kizaru stared solemnly at the man in front of him, who was shrouded in black robes, and said in a deep voice. Give the new era some seeds of hope. Marines. The figure that came suddenly, slowly raised his head, revealing a middle-aged face with strange runes pierced on his face, and the majesty in his eyes was clearly visible. So, why don't you save your son? Kizaru said again. One of the Straw Hat Boys disappeared in the bear's hands. I just need to watch over you and that's it. Don't act rashly, Kizaru. Long said lightly. Whirring. Suddenly, the wind picked up again, rolling the weeds on the ground, becoming more and more violent. Well, you know it. I like this kind of simple thing that does nothing the most. Kizaru giggled, but the light in his eyes was solemn. The situation has become more and more complicated, even Marshal Sengoku, facing such a scene, I am afraid his scalp will be numb. A legendary pirate, a revolutionary who made the whole world tremble. Did you even emerge yourself? Drago. Zhonglu stared at Rayleigh and grinned suddenly. You have all appeared, I came out to see, it seems that there is nothing wrong. Drago said quietly. Do you want to start today? Advertisement. Zhonglu asked. You have your own opponents, and so do I. That's good. Dorag Kaido. It seems so. Zhonglu laughed. He naturally knew the reason for Dorag's sudden appearance, and it was also for Luffy's group. Originally, Rayleigh blocked Kizaru, so Bartholomew Bear could shoot and help Luffy and others escape. But the addition of him made the rescue operation a little more variable, which forced Dorag to show up. Then, Rayleigh, slowly raising his head, his eyes were already filled with stern, boiling fighting intent. Are you ready for a fight? The icy voice came out, as powerful as a sword, and it also shocked everyone present. Buzz. The haki that fills the void is even more vast and majestic. A war. There have been many years, and I haven't fought to the fullest. Come on then, Rayleigh murmured, his eyes flashing, conqueror's haki pounding. Zhonglu. The next second, the two figures in the field suddenly moved. Choke. The long knife cut through the air and collided fiercely. Boom. The terrifying shock waves spread out in an instant, and the ground beneath the feet and the trees that were close to them in the jungle had cracks and cracks. The wind and waves rolled in all directions, and the air was distorted at this moment. Boom. In the sky, dark clouds rolled, lightning and thunder, interlaced endlessly. Zzzz. Between the two long knives, the electric light flickered. What a terrible fight. Kizaru's eyes moved slightly, and his figure retreated. Drago, who was wearing a black robe, also flew away to avoid the aftermath of the battle between the two. He raised his head with inexplicable eyes, watching the battle in this battle. World-class war. After a long while, Drago spit out a solemn sentence. Whether it is Zhonglu or Pluton Rayleigh, they are both the most famous and the strongest in the last era. Their reputation has become a legend in this sea. At this moment, such a battle can undoubtedly be called a world-class legendary battle. It can be said that the sensation it has caused is no weaker than the upcoming war. Advertisement. One is the former admiral of naval headquarters, Zhonglu, the day tiger who was known as the strongest admiral in history. The other is the deputy captain of the Roger Pirates, Pluton Rayleigh. What a terrible war this is. Zon Taomaru took a deep breath, feeling that his whole body was shaking. At this level of battle, they simply cannot participate. Compared to this battle, what are the other things for the Straw Hats? In the field, two figures holding long knives, after colliding for several breaths, suddenly retreated, and then collided fiercely. This time, the posture and trajectory of their wielding knives changed. Zhonglu went down and Rayleigh went up. The two long knives collided again, the terrifying sword intent rose into the sky, and the violent haki also rolled out. The thunderclouds of the sky split in two, everything surrendered under their haki, bent over, the grass on the ground clinging to the ground. Sky cracked. The people in the distant block looked up at the sky, and the whole person was stunned. Then, a gust of wind swept in, blowing over the entire Sabaody archipelago. Ghost Blade Shura. It is obviously not any famous knife in this world, but it has incredible power that is not inferior to them. This knife, but I haven't seen it for a long time. Rayleigh's eyes flickered, and he said in a deep voice. I haven't felt this haki for a long time. Sure enough, only you men who stood at the apex of the previous era can make me burn with all my fighting spirit. Zhonglu grinned. The words fell, and the long knife in his hand turned, and once again stabbed out in a strange trajectory. As the fighting spirit boiling. Me too. This stiff old body seems to be flexible at this moment. A flash of light flashed on Rayleigh's glasses, the corners of his mouth were also curved, and the long knife in his hand swayed precisely, slashing its long knife blade aside. Boom. The void was pierced, and a sharp penetrating force roared out, rubbing his ear and flying into the distance. After a breath, the block behind Rayleigh, the buildings over 1,000 meters, were silently reduced to ruins by the penetrating power of this poke. Such destructive power. Does it count as swordsmanship? The person who saw this scene was stiff all over, his breathing was about to stop, and he felt suffocated. Equally terrifying, Pluton Rayleigh got in the way. Immediately after, the next second. Horrible. Run. The Sabaody archipelago is sinking. People panicked, and fled everywhere, and the entire Sabaody street fell into endless panic for a while. Chapter 134 Warm-up is over. Boom. Over the Sabaody archipelago, dark clouds gather, thunder roars, and winds whiz across the island. What made everyone depressed and trembling was that they saw a clearly visible gap in the center of the cloud, as if the sky had been slashed by a crack. In the end, what happened? The air is shaking and the islands are shaking. With such momentum, is it really human beings fighting? Many civilians on the street looked up at the sky, trembling with fear. Under such power, they shivered. That direction is Zhonglu. Covering the fracture of his right arm, his face became even more sinister because of the pain. The twisted kid looked up at the sky with solemn eyes. Who are you fighting? This shocking shock. Afterwards, he retracted his gaze, gritted his teeth and walked through the chaotic streets towards the port. Leave here. With our current strength, we are not qualified to collide with them. But one day, I will make you look good. On the other side, in the workshop where Corazon was. Boom. The sound of thunder suddenly rang out, and then his complexion was slightly condensed, and he looked up at the sky. What happened? Luo also looked at the gloomy sky with a serious expression, and felt extremely depressed and heavy in his heart. I don't know, I still need to be sure. Corazon said solemnly. Then, he dialed the phone bug, and after a while, his expression was complicated and his eyes were shocked. It was caused by the fight between the two. Luo's expression changed suddenly, and he said in shock, "What did you say?" He looked up again, looking at the cloudy, rumbling sky. Could this gloomy astronomical phenomenon be caused by a human war? But how is this possible? What kind of person can cause such a sensation? Zhang Lu uncle, codenamed Day Tiger. One Piece Roger's right hand, Pluton Rayleigh. They are on this island, fighting. Corazon said solemnly. An unimaginable battle, as long as you think about it, it will make your heart tremble. Then, he raised his head sharply. Take advantage of this chaotic opportunity, get out of here immediately, Luo. This is the best chance to escape. Luo was stunned. But. There is nothing but, such a battle, at this moment, you are not even qualified to watch. Advertisement. Corazon shouted in a deep voice. Leave now. Luo looked complicated, and finally nodded. Okay. When the sky of Sabaody archipelago changed, the island that was very close to naval headquarters was also shaking. The faint repression and majesty permeated the air, making everyone feel as if a stone was pressed in their hearts, feeling chest tightness and suffocation. And this is just because of the Conqueror's hockey residual power emanating from the two fighting in the jungle. Snapped. The bubble burst, Straw Hat Boy Luffy's eyes widened, and the whole person was stunned. Robin, Robin, he roared in pain, fell to his knees, and kept hitting the ground with his head, making a choked sound. All his companions disappeared in front of him in a short period of time. All this made him feel hopeless. It's your turn, Monkey D. Luffy. A low voice sounded, and a huge shadow enveloped Luffy's body. Ah. Luffy growled in pain. We won't see each other again. The voice came into Luffy's ears, but he clearly didn't understand the meaning of the sentence. Slowly raising his head, he saw that the bear's paw had already shrouded his head. Farewell, Bartholomew Bear said softly. Luffy's face shuddered, as if he had noticed something. Boom. A rippling cyclone appeared, and his body disappeared in place. After doing all this, Bartholomew Shong seemed very silent. He turned around and stared silently at the battlefield ahead. Silent, like a mechanical machine that has lost its own consciousness. Boom. The battle between the two figures was extremely fierce. The long knives kept colliding, making a dang-dang sound, and the terrifying fluctuations were constantly sweeping towards the surroundings. The large tree with a radius of several thousand meters was quickly affected and cracked. It's really fun. Ha 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 ha. Zhang Lu grinned, stepped forward, leapt high, and slashed down with the long knife in his right hand. Above the blade, armament hockey covered it, forming a mysterious pattern. Are you serious? Rayleigh snorted softly, and swung the long knife in his hand equally fiercely. Boom. The deafening sound was transmitted again, the ground shattered inch by inch, and a large piece of dust was stirred up and swept away towards the surroundings. Advertisement. The battle between the two did not seem to have a single sword move, but at the moment of the shot, they were all sword moves. The void shook, their figures distorted, and their orientations changed again, with Rayleigh on top and Zhang Lu standing on the ground. It's my turn to shoot. Rayleigh's long knife slashed out. Buzz. Zhang Lu's eyes flashed red, and his body flashed, avoiding the blow. Crack. The ground was completely cut open, and a crack appeared, spreading farther, to dozens of kilometers away. What a terrible slash. Kizaru's eyes flickered in admiration. Have you trained to the ultimate observation hockey? Rayleigh stared at Zhang Lu with a serious expression on his face. The opponent in front of him is the most difficult to deal with. Horrible physicality, Conqueror's hockey all hit their limits. In such a state, every move, every style, and destructive power of the opponent is extremely terrifying. It's hard to deal with. He said softly, his figure flashed, and he swung up again. The next second, the two knives collided fiercely. Boom. The island of Sabaody shook, and dazzling brilliance shone from their centers, creating endless ripples. Whirring. A strong wind swept through the ground and rolled up the dust on the ground. The black robe on Dorig's body trembled, and his eyes flickered as he watched the battle. The world's strongest battle is undoubtedly extremely difficult to encounter. Being able to watch such a battle from the sidelines is also invaluable. Boom. The two in the field seemed to be fighting crazy, and after the long knife collided for a while, they collided dozens of times quickly. Whether it is the speed, trajectory, strength, and reaction of swinging the knife, it has reached the limit of human beings. Even, ordinary people can't even see the trajectory of their movement. Boom. After another collision, the two of them froze, their feet dragged on the ground, and they fell backwards and retreated a distance of 100 meters. Ha ha. Zhang Lu raised his head and let out a loud laugh. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed slightly, and he took a slow breath. Not bad. Pluton Rayleigh. The familiar feeling is coming. 20 years have passed, and you still haven't regressed. Zhonglu held a long knife and stepped forward again. After 3 steps, his eyes stared, and his figure suddenly twisted, flickering from side to side. In just a moment, countless afterimages appeared. Then, the warm-up is over. Chapter 135 Fighting. Call out. Countless afterimages, pulling out a phantom, swept a huge gap on the ground, and in the blink of an eye, it was already in front of Rayleigh. Boom. Zhonglu stepped on the ground with both feet, the ground cracked open, the soil splashed up, and his figure jumped up a few hundred meters into the air. The long knife suddenly lifted, and then turned over, head and feet on top. Zhonglu held a long knife, the tip of the knife was aimed at the ground, and the figure with its head raised suddenly swooped down, bringing out a huge energy. One-shot flow. The low words resounded in the sky, and behind the swooping figure, there was a faint eagle spreading its wings, and its sharp eyes burst into endless majesty. Wow. In the ears of everyone, there seemed to be a loud eagle chirping. Eagle chirping. Call out. In an instant, Zhonglu swooped down, surrounded by angular air hoods, and at lightning speed, his body rubbed against the air, and a sharp bird chirping sounded. Bring it on. Zhonglu. Rayleigh's eyes widened, and the long knife in his hand shone with light, his blade shook, and then he suddenly swung the knife into the sky. The next second, the 2 long knives collided heavily. Boom. Just like 2 meteorites colliding violently, the tip of the knife touched the blade, stabbed and flashed colorful rays of light. The endless air waves, the photoelectricity was born at this moment, oscillating in all directions. Boom. There was another shock, and the ground where Rayleigh was located exploded, and a huge deep pit appeared, and the cracks quickly spread beyond the surrounding area. Are you serious? Zhonglu. Rayleigh's eyes were bright and radiant, and he shouted loudly. You too. Zhonglu laughed. As soon as his wrist turned, the long knife suddenly deflected, and the tip of the knife swiped, swiping across Rayleigh's blade in an instant, causing a flash of lightning. Stab. The loud scraping sound of the blade came out, Zhonglu turned over, and his feet stomped on the air. Boom. His body changed, and the long knife in his hand again swung towards Rayleigh, who was close at hand. One-shot flow. Ban Tiger. The violent aura, the terrifying fighting intent, ignited at this moment, and several lines of armed force suddenly appeared behind him, outlining a ferocious and fierce aura, roaring with his mouth open. Ow. Advertisement. The long knife slashed through the void and swept towards Rayleigh's waist in an instant. The latter stared at him, turned his wrist, and the long knife stood in front of him. When the 2 knives collided between the electric light and flint, making a sound of gold and iron, and the terrifying power erupted at this moment, Rayleigh's figure was knocked out, and the blade in his hand was humming and trembling. Ha 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 ha. Happy. It's been a long time since I fought with all my strength like this. Even the so-called world's greatest swordsman, Hawkeye Mahawk, can't give me such a happy feeling. Zhonglu laughed, his eyes were hot, and the whole body was filled with boiling fighting intent, and the air was fluctuating. Only you guys who fought with me several times in the previous era can give me such a thrilling, blood-boiled pleasure. Let me not need to keep my hands and fight with all my strength. The roar was like thunder, and the momentum on his body was like a crazy angry beast at this moment. Zhonglu strode forward. Every step he took, the momentum on his body increased, and the ground exploded, leaving a big hole. Call out. Its figure tugged again, and it was in front of Rayleigh. The more vigorous fighting spirit burning around him, once again fluctuated, turned into a ferocious and angry dragon, roaring with its mouth open. Zhonglu's body was winding like a dragon, going around where Rayleigh was. The long knife in his hand turned into a dragon's head, and he swung it out again. One-shot flow. Dragon fury. Roar. The sound of the dragon's roar resounded in the sky, and everyone present saw it. The unknown rolling momentum behind Zhonglu fluctuated again, turning into a purplish-red dragon body phantom, roaring with his mouth open. After a shake, the dragon head ran, merged into the blade, and charged towards Rayleigh. Boom. Rayleigh's eyes were solemn, and he swung the knife with all his might. In such a battle, he couldn't help but do his best. The monster in front of him will not hold back at all. The blade collided, the dragon's body was cut off, and Zhonglu's ghost sword, Shira, appeared again, and the blade was humming and trembling, as if a dragon was roaring. Are you fighting? I haven't seen such an aura for a long time. Rayleigh's eyes widened, and Conqueror's haki burst out. Buzz. The air vibrated, and the entire Sabaody archipelago sky was shaking at this moment, and a circle of ripples radiated out, spreading to further blocks. At this moment, whether it was civilians or marine, being swayed by this momentum, they all fell to the ground, with no ability to resist at all. Ha 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 ha. Advertisement. Ordinary people are not qualified, let me use the fighting spirit. Zhonglu laughed. Behind him, the fighting spirit boiled again, and it continued to soar. War spirit. It is said that this is Zhonglu, a unique new aura that combines Conqueror's haki and his crazy fighting spirit. As long as you burn the fighting spirit, your mental state will become stronger and fuller. During the battle, you will forget your exhaustion, injury, and pain. Incarnate into the most ferocious beast. Drago's cloak fluttered and he said solemnly. Yes, Zhonglu in this state is not so easy to see. Combined with his own fruit ability, he is simply an invincible god of war. The more he fights, the more crazy he is. Kizaru sighed softly, constantly burning, more and more crazy fighting intent, combined with that almost indestructible body, instantly turned into the most terrifying opponent in the world. No one is willing to face such Zhonglu, and no one can fight against such an enemy. Ha 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 ha. Do your best, Rayleigh. Otherwise, you will die. Zhonglu laughed, his figure swept away again, the blade rubbed against the air. The fighting spirit in his eyes was high, and the fighting spirit behind him shot straight into the sky, like a wolf's smoke rushing into the night. The latter swayed and avoided the knife. With a sound of explosion, the waves in the sky were stirred up, and the sea surface in a radius of thousands of meters was stirred with ripples, and a huge Uzumaki rotating appeared, like a white dragon moving underwater. A white electric dragon appeared in the void, dissipated suddenly, and arrived in front of Rayleigh. One-shot flow. White dragon. Boom. The Marines on the coast looked at the unsettled sea in front of them, trembling in their hearts. Rayleigh. As fast as lightning, only an old guy like you. Is this the power of the strongest admiral, Hiroder? The meandering white dragon slashed, swam in the void, blinked away, and landed on the sea in the distance. Only qualified to fight against me at my peak. Zhonglu shouted loudly. It's just a monster. Sharp insight. Call out. Chapter 136 Fighting with all your might. Call me old guy over and over again. I'm not happy. Now I feel very young. The whole body's blood is boiling. Rayleigh muttered. When the voice fell, his body flickered and pulled out an arc, and it was in front of Zhonglu. The long knife shook, and armament hockey covered it, and then its eyes flashed red. Zhonglu swung the knife to meet him, but the strange thing was that in the next second, the long knife had avoided his weapon and cut directly in front of him, the blade slashed towards his body. Shish. The blade cut through the skin, a long and narrow bloodstain emerged, and a large swath of blood was thrown out. Zhonglu's fast-moving figure suddenly came to a standstill, and all the onlookers shook their bodies and stopped breathing. The momentum is like a tiger descending the mountain, and Admiral, who is fighting to the sky, is injured. What's even more incredible is that they didn't understand the knife just now. As expected of a legendary character. Drago sighed softly. Pluton Rayleigh. Kizaru snorted softly, his eyes solemn. Even if he is Admiral, facing the attack of the two of them, the tactics used in the battle are still difficult and even fearful. Such a battle is undoubtedly a life-threatening battle. Crazy, brutally terrifying. Ordinary powerhouses, no, even some powerhouses standing on the top of the world, with a bounty of 1 billion, billions of big pirates. In the face of these two people, they are all afraid of their indomitable and fearless fighting spirit, and they are so scared that they can't use 30% of their strength. If you want to fight them, you can. First of all, we must have the fearless courage to give up everything and fight to the death. Tick. In the field, Zhonglu lowered his head and looked at the long and narrow blood on his body, spreading from his neck to his abdomen, and a large amount of blood was rushing out. Ha 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 ha. But suddenly, he burst out laughing. You make me feel pain. Rayleigh. The sound shook the air, and at the moment when it sounded, the ghost knife Shira in his hand also hummed, bursting with purple-red energy. A red light flashed in his eyes, and the long knife swung down suddenly. Rayleigh's eyes froze, his feet stepped on the ground, and he withdrew back. His reaction was already quick, but he still avoided it too late. The opponent's long knife, like the one he used just now, evaded his weapon strangely, and the tip of the knife brushed past his body. Advertisement. Hey. The robe cracked, a bloodstain appeared, and the blood immediately oozes out. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed, and he looked at Zhonglu, who was 100 meters away, and his eyes were extremely dignified. Roger's trick, you really learned it. It's a terrifying talent, obviously I've only fought with him a few times. Zhonglu laughed. The blood on his body was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a few breaths, it disappeared. The long knife in his hand was thrown to the side, and a gap of several kilometers was cut into the ground. The use of Conqueror's Haki, the tricks derived from it, are not complicated tricks. The so-called divine avoidance, in my understanding, is nothing but armament Haki, Conqueror's Haki, observation Haki high level, advanced use in a moment. The sound shook the void, and it also made the people around look dumbfounded. Of course, Rayleigh, what you just used is nothing more than a fusion of armament Haki and observation Haki. That's why you didn't hurt me. So, after a pause, Zhonglu's eyes widened. Roger's God, don't you have a master yet? Rayleigh took a breath and stared at the man opposite. It's not anyone who has such a terrifying talent as you. Yes, ordinary people, even if it's a master Haki fur, are already very difficult. Those who can master armor, observation Haki, are even rarer. And those who can cultivate both kinds of Haki to a certain level can already be regarded as the strongest in the world. Conqueror's Haki, even those who have been evaluated as the aptitude of a king, can only awaken. The three kinds of Haki are cultivated to the ultimate at the same time, and even the fusion is completed, which is derived in an instant and transformed into a trick. This is almost impossible for humans to do. Roger has done it, so he has the trick of avoiding God. And Zhonglu is even more outrageous. He has only played against Roger a few times, and he has learned such a trick. The more and more crazy fighting spirit, the infinite self-healing, the indestructible body that cannot even be killed, the terrifying kendo achievements, the pervert-level monster physique. In addition to the opponent, the legendary day tiger state that has not yet manifested at this time. Such Zhonglu is simply invincible. Who can fight it? Who can win? Rayleigh's thoughts changed. He took a deep breath, his body sank slightly, and his mental state became extremely cohesive. Roger can fight him. Whitebeard can fight him too. Me, 2. He murmured that the state of his old body seemed to have reached some kind of sublimation at this moment, reaching the peak. Advertisement. You can't fight a war of attrition with him. A long battle, even Roger can't take it. Only, use your strongest strength to kill him in a short period of time. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed, and he had already made a decision in his heart. Who can dare to fight a war of attrition with Zhonglu who cannot be killed? The next second, Rayleigh's body suddenly jumped up, pulling out a long line, heading straight for Zhonglu. Hoo-hoo, boom, the wind blew, and the sky thundered. Sensing the momentum of the two, the celestial phenomena changed at this moment, as if shivering and trembling. Not to mention, the civilians on the islands. Everyone is escaping in a panic, rushing to the port. Such a scene, even Marine couldn't stop it. Boom. The next second, at the center of the battlefield, there was a sound of shaking. Immediately afterwards, it was rolled out, and the shocking ripples were extremely terrifying. The strong wind was blowing over everyone's heads, and a depressing and dull aura shrouded the dome. The two knives squeaked, and after 2 seconds of stalemate, Rayleigh's eyes widened. Don't underestimate me, Zhonglu. The blades collided, and a terrifying force invaded. Zhonglu's body shook, and then flew out like a cannonball. This is the battle where the old man tried his best. Just take your normal state. Rayleigh's voice came out, and his body flew away, chasing the flying figure of Zhonglu at a high speed. Ha 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 ha. Although you are old, your strength is. It didn't disappoint me at all. Zhonglu's voice came from the smashed ruins, and in the next second, with a bang, the sand and stones flew out, and his figure stepped out. The door opens in 1 step, the door opens in 3 steps, and the door opens in 9 steps. The green energy rushed to the top of the head, the black hair was twisted at this moment, and his face was also reflected madly. 10 steps later, Zhonglu waved his knife and faced Rayleigh who was rushing up. Boom. The two knives collided, creating more terrifying ripples, radiating to the farther sea in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the sea around Sabaody archipelago boiled. Chapter 137 We are just here to collect corpses. Crash. The waves rolled and slapped towards the distance, and in the blink of an eye they spread farther. Above the sky, dark clouds gathered, and thunder and lightning roared in a staggered manner. Horrible. Their battle scares even the sky. Is this the battle of the world-class powerhouses? It's almost like the end of the world. Everyone was trembling and fearful, and they were even more shocked by the two people who were fighting on the island. Woo 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 woo. The gust of wind roared and swept the entire sky. On the island that was blowing, flowers, plants and trees swayed left and right, rolling up the sand and dust on the ground. Boom. Thunder roared, and the entire island flickered. Suddenly, at a certain moment, along with a certain bright lightning, it bombarded the roof of a building, and pouring rain poured down. The sound of pearls falling onto the plate crackled. The Sabaody archipelago, and the surrounding sea, experienced a storm like no one had ever seen before. It's like crying in fear at this moment of the day. Meanwhile, Mariajoy, what did you say? Zhonglu and Pluton Rayleigh fought at Sabaody archipelago. Sengoku, who had just heard the news, suddenly changed his face, followed by fine sweat oozing out of his forehead. Yes, Master Marshal, the battle is very fierce. The war even triggered changes in the sky, and the whole island was shrouded in their terrifying aura. Now, on the orders of Kizaru Admiral, Marine is rapidly moving the civilians, nobles, of the fighting area they are in. In addition, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Dorag, is also suspected of appearing in the Sabaody archipelago, holding Kizaru Admiral in check. Marine, who came to report the news, looked extremely serious. Whether it is the battle between Admiral and Pluton Rayleigh, or the sudden appearance of Dorag, it is a very important event. Are you crazy? Zhonglu chose to shoot at Rayleigh at this time. What a lunatic. Sengoku's face changed and he shouted. The two legendary battles, what should we do? At the moment, it seems that everyone but Admiral can't step in. The officer said solemnly. I thought he would wait peacefully for the war to come and fight Whitebeard. I didn't expect it. This guy has gone crazy. Even Pluton Rayleigh didn't let it go. Sengoku suddenly sighed and said helplessly. How much resentment does he have towards the Roger Pirates? Just then, the phone bug on the table in front of him rang. The officer was startled and looked at Sengoku. Go on, it's time to see what they say. Sengoku Kaido. Advertisement. The officer nodded, then answered the phone bug. Suddenly, the phone number on the table changed to an old and majestic look. I think you should have gotten the news, Sengoku. An old voice came out. Zhonglu and Pluton Rayleigh fought in the Sabaody archipelago. I just want to hear your opinions on this matter. Sengoku said solemnly. At this time, who is it if it is not the 5 old men? Pluton Rayleigh, the remnant of the Roger Pirates. Isn't it your Marine's responsibility to catch pirates? The old voice came out, and the meaning of the words was obvious. Do you mean to take this opportunity to capture Pluton Rayleigh? Sengoku said solemnly. Since Zhonglu is happy to fight with such a guy, it has caused the situation at this moment. Take this opportunity to end the remnants of these pirates, isn't it the best choice? The old man said lightly. There are some nobles on the island. Sengoku spoke up. The world government will assist Marine and quickly evacuate the people from the island. This is a chance, Sengoku. Since he is willing to take the lead, then we should also have the courage to start a war. The cold voice echoed, and Sengoku's eyes sharpened. Consistent with my opinion. As long as you can solve the troubles of those world nobles, Marine will have no more obstacles. Hearing this, the voice of the phone bug quickly came out. Let go and do it. On this matter, our goals are the same. Then, the phone bug hung up. The room was calm, and the officer felt a little suffocated at this time. He knew very well that in just a few words, a major event was set to happen. Help me contact Aokiji, Akainu, the two admirals. After a while, Sengoku said solemnly. Yes. The officer was shocked when he heard the words, and quickly responded with a loud shout. Oh dear, this time, the three admirals will come out together. Sabaody Archipelago will usher in a horror scene that will shock the world. Naval Headquarters, Marineford, Pluton Rayleigh. Zhonglu fought Rayleigh. The two figures came out at the same time, and in the next second, the tall figure slowly stood up and both walked out of the headquarters building. Advertisement. Catch Pluton Rayleigh. It's really a heart-shaking mission. Aokiji said softly. The two warships moved almost simultaneously, heading for the Sabaody Archipelago. At this moment, the strongest combat power of naval headquarters was moved by this sudden war. Sabaody Archipelago. Go now. Luo, your companions, I will send someone to inform them. The other two admirals in the marine have already been dispatched and are heading towards the Sabaody Archipelago. At this moment, all the pirates on this island are fleeing. Corzone's face was extremely solemn. What? The other two admirals are here too. Is it because of the old man in the auction house? Luo was shocked. He didn't dare to stay any longer, and immediately said goodbye to Corzone and headed for the place where his boat was. After sending Luo away, Kay Lassen took a deep breath, then looked up at the sky with a solemn expression. It really caused a big event. Zhonglu uncle. But this style is yours. On the other side, two figures shrouded in black robes gradually approached the fierce battle. A circle of violently colliding ripples radiated from the top of their heads, and the strong wind blew their robes, and the air seemed to be distorted. What an amazing battle. Kaku was shocked. They are still nearly 1,000 meters away from the battlefield, but the terrifying aura is already incomparably intimidating, and the heart is trembling at this moment. This is the battle between the strongest in the world. Representing Zhonglu, the strongest day tiger ever in marine. Pluton Rayleigh, the right hand of the king of pirates. Rob Lucci said softly. He seems pretty sure he can beat Pluton. But now it seems that the battle between the two is terrifying, but it seems to be evenly matched. Kaku blinked. Just watch it quietly. Lucci said in a deep voice, his eyes staring at the field, constantly colliding, stretching, and drawing countless light and shadow figures, his face dignified. We're just here to collect corpses. Kaku sighed. I heard that the two admirals of naval headquarters have already set off and headed here. Can we really take Pluton Rayleigh in their hands? Rob Lucci's tone was calm. The strength of the numbered person is not inferior to that of Admiral. Chapter 138 Fierce Battle. Boom. The rolling air waves radiated out, and the ripples rolled on the ground like ocean waves, oscillating further away. A figure wrapped in vigor flew out, hitting the ground and blasting a large piece of dust, but after a short period of time. Call out. As if the light was pulling, the void was twisted, and the figure rushed out again, pulling out the phantoms on the ground, coming to another figure again, and waving the long knife. Boom. There was another shock, the current lacing, the roar of thunder in the sky, the wind whistling, and ripples in the sky. Is this your strongest amplification transformation state? Zhonglu. Rayleigh looked solemn and said in a deep voice. Holding a knife in his right hand, he was doing his best to resist the terrifying force from the opposite side. Crack. Under such a force of confrontation, the ground beneath his feet was even shattered and sunk. Sure enough, it's as powerful as a monster. Even, it exceeds the physique of the giants. The two long knives collided, and after a stalemate for a few breaths, the two instantly retreated and smashed the ground. The breeze was blowing, and the space was distorted. The two people who have already withdrawn hundreds of meters, their eyes are cold and radiant, and the next second they are holding the long knife and swinging up again. Running and jumping. When they were 50 meters away, the two jumped into the air, and the long knife in their right hand cut the air and swung out. Buzz. The space shook, and two arc-shaped slashing waves collided fiercely. Boom. After a breath, the sky of Sabaody Island shook, and the rolling black clouds were affected by the slashing blow, shattering out of the cracks, and the electric and light within them were intertwined. But such a shocking scene still did not affect their battle. Their bodies in the air flickered, they were approaching again, and the two long knives collided again. When the sound of gold and iron was crisp, and the ripples and shock waves swept in all directions again. Ha 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 ha. Happy. Zhonglu's loud laughter shook the world, and his momentum was already the strongest. His whiskers were agitated, and the green energy turned into electric current, which flickered around him. At this moment, he was in a terrifyingly strong state. It turned around, stepped back again, and then pulled again, coming to Rayleigh from the other direction, waving the long knife down. Come again. Come again. Zhonglu laughed wildly, falling into madness. Rayleigh's eyes were solemn, and he raised his knife to resist, defending the opponent's attacks one by one. Advertisement. But his heart is getting heavier and heavier. With the increase of fighting spirit, Zhonglu, who has gradually entered the strongest state, is stronger with each knife. Unlike the other party, his peak state will not last for too long. A well-matched battle was not suitable for him, and he would even lose without a doubt. Did you beat me? This is an unacceptable result. Even if the old man is old. Muttering in his heart, Rayleigh raised his head and saw Zhonglu, who was stomping on the air with his feet one after another, with a crazy look, and slashed again with his knife. His eyes narrowed, he also roared, raised the knife and swung it away. Boom. The majestic power swept in, and above the two long knives, there seemed to be golden sakura flowers flying and entwining. After a breath, Rayleigh's body shook and fell from the air. Zhonglu's body was also shaken to a higher place. Boom. With his feet on the ground, his knees slightly bent, he removed all the force from the knife just now, and a wisp of blood oozes from the corner of Rayleigh's mouth. With its body as the center, the ground in a radius of several thousand meters rolled up like ocean waves, pushing it farther, with a rumbling sound. Strength is stronger, and this is not the strongest form. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed, and his right hand clenched the long knife again. As one of the three admirals of the last era, Zhonglu's code name is Day Tiger, but today's image, the iconic tiger-shaped energy, has not yet appeared. Only after the Day Tiger appeared, this man was in the strongest state. If you can't even stop your state at this time. That's ridiculous. Taking a deep breath, Rayleigh stomped his knees on the ground, jumped up, and charged into the sky. Its figure turned into a streamer, and after a few flashes, it was in front of the figure that also swooped down. I just like your fighting spirit. Pluton Rayleigh. Zhonglu grinned grimly. The long knives vibrated, hockey twisted, and collided again. Boom. The figures of the two flew out again, landing heavily on the ground. Call. This time, they were thousands of meters apart, and the surrounding ground had been reduced to ruins. Drago, Kizaru and others had already left the battlefield and watched the battle from a distance. The next second, the two pairs of eyes collided, and without hesitation, he waved the long knife in his hand. Call out. Two huge flying slashes cut through the ground, charged towards each other, and then collided fiercely, canceling each other out. At the same time, the two figures were already running, and they collided with each other. Advertisement. Boom 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 boom. They keep bumping, keep retreating. The violent energy filled the air of the entire island. As the figure moved, there was even more dust and dirt. Boom. What's even more bizarre is that the entire island and the surrounding waters are raining heavily, but not a single drop of rain falls in the area where they are. Can stop my attack like this. All I can say is it's you, Rayleigh. Zhonglu kept swinging the knife, his body was erratic, and he launched an attack. The same is true for the other side, terrifying speed, powerful strength, penultimate's reflexes, and the world's top kendo. Pluton Rayleigh, known as the right hand of One Piece by the world, is definitely not a vain name, and his strength is at the legendary level. Even though he is old, his body is still in perfect condition, and he can exert the ultimate fighting power. It was precisely because of this that he was able to resist the force of his sixth gate's full opening and keep up with his terrifying physical speed. And this, but the previous Golden Lion Shiki could not do. You still have the strongest state. The Day Tiger who once fought Roger. If you can't even wait for that form, the old man will be disappointed. Rayleigh said aloud. Is it the strongest? Zhonglu grinned. Maybe. They swung their knives again, then dragged their feet back on the ground, pulling the distance. Hoo-hoo. Rayleigh sees sweat on his forehead, blood seeps from the corners of his mouth, and his mental power has been condensed to the limit. In such a state, his physical strength and energy are rapidly being consumed. On the other hand, under the increase of the fighting spirit, there will be no fear, no pain, and no fatigue, just like a god of war who is getting stronger and stronger. The current state is at the peak of the most prosperous moment. What a terrible guy. If you want to consume it hard, you can only rely on the state at this moment. I can live until I'm exhausted. Rayleigh sighed inwardly. Only when facing Zhonglu, can I deeply feel the strength and terror of the other party. At this moment, a more abundant and powerful breath shook the void, and a crazy voice came from the front. 8 inner gates. The 7th gate, the door is opened. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed and his heart sank. Are you going to do your best? Chapter 139 I will send you off. 8 inner gates. The legend is that Zhonglu was inspired by the 6 forms and created a new body art. 6 styles are divided into shave, tempest kick, finger pistol, moonwalk, paper arts, iron body. Only geniuses whose physique has reached the superhuman stage have acquired qualifications. And Zhonglu's 8 inner gates is completely different. He is more similar to the return of life other than the 6th form. It is a kind of control over vitality, which can release one's own vitality through the stimulation of ultimate to complete an exaggerated increase in physique. Looking at the figure in the field, the aura suddenly soared. Kizaru's complexion also became extremely solemn at the moment. The so-called 8 inner gates gesture, this world, not everyone can see. Even he, in the battle with Zhonglu, had never seen this look. I only heard legends before, but today I finally see it. The blue steam boiled around Zhonglu like smoke, and the terrifying breath made one feel frightened even from a distance. Monster-level physique, Zhonglu in this state, I don't know if Bigumum can compete with the famous Kaido. Kizaru muttered. So, can the real Day Tiger see it? His eyes moved, staring at the figure in the field. I saw Zhonglu's whole body was soaring, and his face was a little hideous under the blue steam. The mist around his body was boiling, and the terrifying high temperature made the temperature in the air rise. Suddenly, contrary to everyone's expectations, Zhonglu returned the long knife to its sheath. What does this mean? He doesn't need a knife anymore. Zon Taomaru said in surprise, with a look of incomprehension. Pluton Rayleigh, who was standing opposite Zhonglu, did not change his expression, but the expression in his eyes became more solemn. Everyone knows that you are a great swordsman. But the people who have really fought with you just now know that you are the strongest in physical art. The long knife will limit your combat power. With a soft voice, the long knife in Rayleigh's hand shook, his eyes narrowed slightly, and a faint conqueror's breath permeated out. After that, his body was a little short, and his heart was dignified. It's going to be hard. This battle, muttering, Rayleigh's eyes flickered, and a madness passed by. In the face of a crazy person like Zhonglu, if you want to fight against one, you must also make yourself crazy. Otherwise, as long as you have a little bit of fear and jealousy, you will make yourself timid, and you will lose instantly in the confrontation of will. In such a situation, it would be inevitable. Time flies, 20 years in the blink of an eye. Ren Yu and I used to be peerless, standing in the world and subverting, but now, they are already old fellows in the world. Rayleigh, advertisement. The so-called legends, in their eyes, are just guys who should have died long ago. Zhonglu's voice came, and the blue mist around him became more and more boiling. You are different from us, Zhonglu. You are now in your prime, at your peak. Rayleigh said in a low voice. Yes, although the other party was at the same height as them 20 years ago, Zhonglu was too young. Young, even 20 years ago, his age is still in his prime. Age, maybe, but my heart is old. Zhonglu sighed lightly. The acquaintances in the eyes have ended one by one, and the world has given up to new guys. The guys who used to be nothing in their eyes have begun to appear. How do you feel? Rayleigh's face was calm, although he wondered why the other party suddenly said such words, but he answered patiently. This is how the world is. The old man leaves and the new man comes on. The times are changing, and this is the world. Zhonglu laughed. You really want to go? But in my eyes, all of you familiar faces, either enemies or friends, just leave the stage one by one. It really makes me feel complicated. Compared to being defeated by the so-called newcomers and juniors in the future, it ended sadly. On the contrary, it would be better to lose under my hands, and I will feel better in my heart. Rayleigh looked startled. Is that why you are desperate to shoot at me on a sensitive occasion like Sabaody Archipelago? If you don't fight, you'll be old, Rayleigh. You are, so is Whitebeard. Even if you are strong, you are already old age. Zhonglu sighed lightly. So, the words fell, and the body was shocked, and he took a step forward. At this step, there was a faint sound of tiger roaring in the void, his hands slowly clenched into fists, and tiger-shaped chi energy emerged. I'll send you off. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed, and when he saw the other side's appearance, he was also ready for a more intense battle to come. Yes, then let me see, the so-called day tiger. Zhonglu grinned and stepped out in 3 steps. His momentum was like a tiger descending the mountain, and the ground shook with his footsteps. Boom boom boom. After 3 steps, its figure suddenly rushed forward, pulled and turned into a blue streamer, which could not be seen clearly by the fast naked eye. Advertisement. Under the big strides, the ground was covered with flying sand and rocks, and a huge gap was plowed in the places passing by. Rayleigh's body disappeared at the same time. Day tiger. The sound of a tiger's roar sounded in the low voice. Then, everyone saw Zhonglu, who was running very fast, with his fists waving out. Ow! The tiger-shaped shock wave rushed towards Rayleigh in an instant. The latter's long knife shook and swung out, and Conqueror's hockey waved around his body at this moment, making his aura even stronger. Boom! The slash split the shock wave in an instant, and the next second, the 2 figures quickly approached, and then collided fiercely. Zhonglu leapt up, swooped down, and threw his fists out. Boom! The air pressure in the air suddenly increased at this moment, and the terrifying pressure covered the figure on the ground. Rayleigh looked up sharply, his eyes glaring. Buzz! Conqueror's hockey blasted out. The long knife in his hand was also waving up with an inexplicable powerful breath. Boom! The figure suddenly retreated, moved and turned, and in a blink of an eye, the head and feet were up, the right foot swiped the air, and a terrifying breath wrapped around it. In the next second, the fist collided with the blade, and a dark lightning flashed out, staggering towards the surroundings, triggering continuous explosions. On his arm, the wound quickly appeared, and blood was flowing, but it recovered again almost in an instant. Boom! The ground shook. Rayleigh's whole body trembled, his pupils contracted, and the long knife in his hand trembled. Rayleigh. Boom! I will too. A roaring tiger-shaped impact appeared faintly. There was another explosion under Rayleigh's feet, his feet sagging and the mud covering the crook of his calf. You have also used the ability to press the bottom of the box. Conqueror's twine. Zhonglu's voice came, his right foot pressed down again, and the violent Conqueror's hockey boiled and exploded at this moment. Zhonglu laughed. The next second, Zhonglu suddenly flipped, his right foot whizzed down, and kicked Rayleigh below again. Ow! Chapter 140. What a huge power. Zhonglu's kick was like a mountain being smashed down, causing half of Rayleigh's legs to sink into the mud. Immediately after a meal, the ground cracked and shattered, and huge cracks appeared. Zzzz. The current surged, and the terrifying Conqueror's breath collided violently at this moment. The 2 legendary powerhouses who have cultivated hockey to ultimate, at this moment, the hockey on their bodies is almost constantly colliding. After a few breaths, Rayleigh glared suddenly and roared, "Ha!" The long knife in his hand suddenly exerted force, and red light flashed in his eyes. The blade swiped across Zhonglu's fist and slashed away at another weird angle. Between the lights and flint, Zhonglu swayed and avoided the knife. His feet landed on the ground 500 or 600 meters away from Rayleigh, and the red light in his eyes dissipated. Conqueror's entanglement, armor-colored armor, plus sight-colored foresight. The battle between the two legends, in milliseconds, shows a master's precise control of his own skills, situation judgment, and incomparable control. It's terrifying. Two legends. Kizaru's eyes were solemn and he said softly. The battle between the two on the field and the use of Conqueror's haki made him tremble with fear. This kind of haki realm is not something ordinary people can achieve. Armament haki high level, Conqueror's entanglement, the foreseeable future. These high-level haki skills made him fearful. The Drago black robe on the side shrouded his body, and his breath was deep and condensed, but it was also conceivable that he attached great importance to this battle. Suddenly, his body moved slightly, and his head twisted to the other side. Our admiral out. What a spectacular scene. Muttering, Drago swayed. The next second, the gust of wind swept up, and his figure disappeared. Kizaru still stood there, watching the ongoing battle with a solemn expression, ignoring Drago's departure. Meanwhile, at the port of Sabaody archipelago, the two figures stepped down, and the cloak of justice behind them shook with the wind. Admiral of Headquarters, Akainu. Admiral of Headquarters, Aokiji. Admiral is actually dispatched. Is it for the battle between those two legends? Marines at the port, civilians, and pirates hiding around are all nervous at this moment, with a feeling of trembling. Advertisement. This scene is simply too shocking. Headed by the two Admiral of Headquarters, behind them was a headquarters officer with the rank of general on his shoulders, and a large number of elite Marines rushed off the warship. Before Whitebeard arrives, did you take action on Pluton Rayleigh, the vice captain of the original One Piece Roger? Marine's courage is also shocking. Someone was amazed. The vice captain of One Piece, but he will never be inferior to the world-class powerhouses such as Roger, Whitebeard, etc. To attack such a legendary character will have to bear a considerable price. Marine must have heard of Pluton Rayleigh's presence in the Sabaody archipelago before, but no one has ever acted like this. To this day, all this is probably because of the man on the island who was fighting with him. As soon as he stepped on the Sabaody archipelago, Aokiji's complexion became solemn, he looked up at the gloomy, raining sky, and he let out a long breath. There is a suffocating smell in the air. Such a sense of terrifying oppression can only be caused by the battle between the two of them. Akainu looked cold and stepped forward. It's a good idea to grab a Pluton Rayleigh before dealing with Whitebeard. Just give the pirates in this world a warning. The two admirals stepped towards the battlefield area, the momentum on their bodies was equally powerful and trembling. With dense footsteps, stepping on the stagnant water and splashing large drops of water, Marine was moving fast and rushed to the center of the battlefield. And the closer they got to the battlefield, the heavier the suppressed aura above their heads, like a mountain shrouded in a shadow, casting a shadow over their hearts. I heard it was Zhonglu Admiral, fighting Pluton Rayleigh. Such a scene is really trembling. My heart couldn't help beating faster, and I even felt the weapon in my hand became heavy. It's haki, their conqueror's haki colliding. This feeling of palpitations is unprecedented. The Marines all tense and look forward. But even with such a clear perception, it is still impossible to see the scene ahead, because there is still a considerable distance from the battlefield. Below the general level, I'm afraid you can't get close to the edge of the battlefield. This is a war that only Admiral can watch and participate in. As the team moved forward, it was getting closer to the battlefield. Marines below the general level were all stationed, and they could no longer move forward. PFF'd. Suddenly, a wave of ripples spread, and Marine's eyes turned white, and he fell unconscious on the ground. Go back. You can't stand the haki in the air. Even a general-level officer was shaky at this time and was struggling to endure the discomfort. Damn, these two guys. Advertisement. It's just the aftermath of haki, can't we even bear it? What a monster. With a dignified face and wild eyelids, the team began to retreat. It wasn't until after a few thousand meters that the dizziness and vomiting got better. At this time, they noticed that the walls in the block were already covered with fine cracks, showing ripples. They were all radiated by haki and collided. Conqueror's haki, it has reached the realm of affecting real objects. The battle between those two people is not something we can participate in at all. At this moment, many people trembled and felt fear. They didn't even see the scene on the battlefield, but they could already feel the terrifying strength of those two people. I can't believe that if I really faced it, it would be such a scene. The troublemaker is here. There was something wrong with the atmosphere in the air. Rayleigh's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said in a deep voice. This is a battle between you and me, Rayleigh. I won't let anyone interfere with us. Zhonglu shouted loudly. He has also felt the two figures that are approaching fast not far ahead. That's the best, Rayleigh said softly. His eyes narrowed, and he concentrated all his energy again on the man in front of him. The next second, his body flashed, and the whole person was running fast. At the same time, Zhonglu also roared, bent down sharply, and inserted his hands into the ground in front of him. Then, his hands jerked up. Crack. The ground quickly spread out cracks, showing a ring shape, wrapping several kilometers in front of it. Boom. Immediately afterwards, Zhonglu raised his hands. The ground with a radius of several thousand meters was pulled up with a bang, flew into the air, and smashed fiercely towards Rayleigh, who was charging. A huge shadow shrouded the front, and as far as the eye could see, it was a piece of land. Rayleigh's pupils contracted, and the position of the long knife in his hand changed. What a great power. Chapter 141 continued to take the trick. Woo! Every inch of the land was shattered, and the airflow was suddenly lifted up by a large piece of ground at this moment, and the crushing was frantically scurrying. Huge shadows lay in front of Rayleigh, occupying every corner of his vision. Crack! The sound of shattering sounded one after another, and every inch of the ground rolled up to the sky at this moment. Judging from Zhonglu's vision, the ground was like a table, which was forcibly overturned by him. Boom! Tens of millions of tons of ground, stones, and clods, driving turf and trees, crashed down and rolled down at this moment. Rayleigh took a deep breath. His eyes were already serious and dignified, his knees were slightly bent, and the conquerors wrapped around the blade, shining with fine electric flowers. Suddenly, his figure disappeared, and the whole person was pulled into a flash of lightning in an instant. Then, approaching with extreme speed, before reaching the covered earth, the long knife in his hand suddenly swung out. Buzz! The fine blade light flickered, whistled forward, and slashed towards the ground under the scroll. Boom! A deafening sound rang out, and the earth with a radius of several thousand meters shattered into countless tiny stones, and fell to the ground. Smoke, gravel, flowers and grass blocked the view. Rayleigh stepped on the falling stone one after another with his feet, and went forward with extreme speed. He knew very well that Zhonglu's attack could never be as simple as that, and there must be a backhand. Suddenly, the air on one side shook suddenly, and the gravel in the void of hundreds of meters turned into powder with a buzz, followed by a figure that was pulled, and reached him like an electric light. Day Tiger. Crashing. A low voice sounded, and the figure was like a ferocious tiger down the mountain, surrounded by tiger-shaped energy, driving huge air waves, impacting, and punching. Rayleigh's pupils shrank, the long knife in his hand flipped. I knew you were coming. Observation Haki, Armament Haki, Conqueror's Haki, perfectly blended at this moment, all burst out, and the space in which they were located was distorted at this moment. All over the body, as if flashing colorful light. The other hand that was originally free had also been grasped on the handle of the knife without knowing it, and his eyes were extremely sharp at this moment. Swinging the knife, the robes on his body vibrated, extremely sharp, and the aura that solidified into ultimate was like turning into a blade at this moment. God avoid. Rayleigh snorted softly. The void was like a flash of lightning rushing past, and everyone's eyes became extremely bright. In front of the faint Zhonglu, another figure appeared. The mustache, the captain's hat, and the domineering breath on his body are constantly boiling. Roger. Advertisement. Zhonglu murmured. The smile on his face became more prosperous, his fist swung down suddenly, collided with the rushing long knife, and then changed direction and collided again. Boom. The air collapsed, and the space was distorted, twisted, terrifying air waves, ripples, and shocks radiating toward the surrounding circles. Kizaru's robes shook wildly, and the wind swept his scalp back. What a spectacular fight. A low voice sounded, and the other two voices were approaching, coming to Kizaru, also staring at the two colliding figures in the field. They are all the world's top powerhouses. Hockey like this makes me shudder. Aokiji said solemnly. Is this a legendary character? Akainu said lightly, and a light flashed in his eyes. The two people in the field were surrounded by the violent airflow and the strong impact. Ordinary people could not even get close to them within a kilometer, and could not resist the swept wind and waves. In the best shape, Rayleigh. I just don't know how long you can last in this state. How long has it brought me happiness? With a big grin, Zhonglu said aloud. The fist collided with the long knife, and after 3 breaths, his figure flew out with a bang, and a huge gap was swept across the ground, stirring up the sky. When everything was calm again, Rayleigh's figure emerged, blood oozing from the corners of his mouth, and his body seemed to tremble, but the light between his eyes was bright and bright. Ha 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 ha. It's really exciting. Zhonglu laughed again and stepped forward. Da da da. After 3 steps, its figure suddenly flew out, and after a breath, it turned into an afterimage, and the fast naked eye couldn't see it clearly. Rayleigh held a knife in both hands, and his eyes kept scanning left and right, judging the trajectory of Zhonglu's attack. Left, right, heaven. In the blink of an eye, the gust of wind was already coming. He suddenly raised his head and looked into the air, only to see Zhonglu whistling down again. Rayleigh had knives in both hands, his eyes flashing red. At ultimate speed, even observation Haki may not be able to perfectly follow Zhonglu's attack. Hoo-hoo. Breathing in slowly, Rayleigh concentrated on the flickering afterimage. Suddenly, his figure turned around, and the long knife was lifted out. This blow. Advertisement. In the back. Boom. The ground exploded again, and the turbulent ripples shot in all directions. Zhonglu's figure emerged, and his mouth cracked into a crazy smile. Beautiful work, Rayleigh. Perfect defense under the old experience. He suddenly closed his fist, and his figure disappeared again with a flicker, and then it turned into an afterimage again. 1 flash, 2 flashes, 3 flashes, and in the blink of an eye, in front of Rayleigh, thousands of Zhonglu's shadows appeared. Can you tell which one is me? Even if you can judge the real body under extreme speed. Can you resist my next punch? The sound came out and entered Rayleigh's ears. When he looked at the next scene, his pupils contracted, and his heart was even more heavy. Roar. A low tiger roar sounded, and thousands of Zhonglu's fists condensed a tiger-shaped shock wave, which was extremely hideous. Immediately the next second, the thousands of Zhonglu jumped high and threw a fist at him who was standing on the ground. Day Tiger. 1,000 layers of shadows. Ow. The roar of the tiger shook the sky, and thousands of tiger-shaped shock waves fell from the sky like a meteorite. For almost an instant, it drowned Rayleigh's figure. Call out. At this moment, a sharp slash shot out, followed by a thunderous explosion, the ground shattered inch by inch, and huge deep pits appeared. Smoke and dust filled the air, and the airflow was condensed. Zhonglu looked down and accurately found the figure below holding a long knife. After grinning, he swooped down again. Continue to recruit. Rayleigh. Almost instantly, he reached the top of the opponent's head and slashed down like a knife. Day Tiger. Tiger roar. The robe on Rayleigh's body was shattered at this moment, and blood continued to flow from the corner of his mouth, but he still raised the knife in the face of this kick. God avoid. It is another Shikigami avoidance, surrounded by thunder and lightning, and the momentum is majestic. Boom. The two collided again. Rayleigh gritted his teeth, his face became hideous, and blood was dripping down the corner of his mouth. Under the continuous attacks, his body seems to have reached its limit. Chapter 142. Leave yourself in the old times. The wind is howling, the air is howling. The two pairs of eyes stared at each other, the long knife collided with the flesh and blood, and the electric current flashed in the middle. Boom. The ground collapsed again, and it was already devastated. After a few breaths, Rayleigh was shocked, blood spurted out of his mouth, and his figure flew out, rolling on the ground one after another. The limit state of spiritual will does not mean that his body can still support it. Zhonglu's physique is too strong. No matter how many collisions, the injuries and internal injuries caused by the shock will disappear in an instant. But Rayleigh can't. His aging body is enduring the shocking force caused by each wave of the huge power of the two. Is it over? Catch Pluton. Rayleigh, Akainu, who was watching from a distance, narrowed his eyes and walked towards here. Rolling on the ground, Rayleigh, who flew out nearly 1,000 meters, was covered in blood, holding the knife in his right hand against the ground, and his whole body was trembling. Puff. Suddenly, he bent down and spat out a mouthful of blood again. Old. My body can't support it anymore. Muttering, Rayleigh stood up slowly. What a pity. I thought I could last longer. Sighing lightly, Rayleigh looked down at his right hand holding the knife. The limit of his body made him want to hold the knife with all his strength. Even his hands are shaking. Under the collision of huge force, the aftershocks generated naturally require extremely high physical fitness. Armament hockey. It is impossible to defend against the shocking force all the time. In particular, the armament hockey of the two have already cultivated to a high level, and emission hockey can directly attack the main body through the surface. If I were young, yes, I can fight him for another 3 days and 3 nights. Rayleigh sighed slightly. Although the spirit of will has entered an unprecedented state, this specific spirit cannot be sustained after all. He will lose. But it was not the flaws in the battle between the two who lost, the skills of the battle, but the loss to time and to their old age. But Rayleigh, as he said before, has no regrets. Humans are meant to grow old. No matter how beautiful you are, you used to be extremely powerful, and your strength will decline rapidly when you are old. Era, after all, is to be given to young people. Although I don't know, what are you doing so desperately to find me and want to defeat me? Breathing in slowly, Rayleigh forcibly stopped the trembling, stepped forward and walked away slowly. Advertisement. But that beats Pluton's name, if you want it. Just take it. With a flick of the long knife in his right hand, the sword energy shot out, the light in his eyes was still fierce, and his state was still at its peak. The decline of the body is not only, but it cannot make a strong man like him unable to fight. Just like Roger, even though he is seriously ill, he can still exert the ultimate fighting power. Pluton Rayleigh, too, but before he was defeated, he also wanted to experience, and enjoyed the ultimate battle in this way. The exhaustion and pain all seemed to disappear at this moment, and even a smile appeared on Rayleigh's face. Ha 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 ha, you're right, Zhonglu. Happy. This battle is really enjoyable. I seem to see that man come to me again and say to me, our meeting is fate. Rayleigh, come with me to turn the world upside down. He said loudly, stepped forward, and walked towards Zhonglu. Zhonglu's eyes were slightly startled, and there was a touch of respect in his eyes. Of course, he could see the specific situation of this opponent, who seemed to be in perfect condition standing in front of him. Physical damage does not kill the spirit. The mind can control the body. Humans are born ordinary, and mortal bodies will age, get injured, and get sick, but the will of human beings cannot be damaged or disappeared. You've never been a quiet kid, Zhonglu. Want to beat me? Do you want to do something? Then do it. Let me see how far you can disrupt the world. Rayleigh's voice drifted. Pluton Rayleigh. Zhonglu suddenly said solemnly. The old days are over. The short words made Rayleigh's eyes narrow, and then he laughed. Ha 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 ha. You are right. In this era, there is no ship that can carry us. Whether it's Whitebeard, me, or Shiki, who was rumored to be on the move again some time ago. We've all left ourselves in the old days. After a pause, he smiled again. That's why I tried my best to save some seeds for the new era even if I risked a fight with you. Advertisement. The old man dies and the child is born. This is the inheritance of mankind, the eternal destiny. Stepping forward, Rayleigh's eyes narrowed suddenly, looking at the tall figure in front of him. Marine Admiral, Akainu. This suddenly appeared, and the man standing in front of him was Akainu. Pluton Rayleigh, you scum on the one-piece ship should have been arrested long ago. Corrupted pirates are all excrement on the sea. The so-called Roger, the ridiculous pirate king, is a shame in the world. A cold voice came out, and Akainu's humiliation was not polite at all. As a marine admiral, he has never been able to deal with the so-called darkness, pirates, and sin. The naval headquarters really came out to deal with me. Rayleigh sighed softly. Before the battle with Zhonglu, and now the three admiral are gathered here, his fate is clearly visible. I will execute you here. A guy like you doesn't need to be sent to impel down at all. Akainu said coldly. With his footsteps moving and the magma stirring on his body, he was about to launch an attack on the enemy in front of him. Rayleigh jerked the long knife in his right hand, ready to fight. Even if the situation was extremely serious, a man like him would never think about surrendering or not resisting. But in the next second, his eyes froze. Akainu's footsteps were also stunned, his scalp was numb, and the hairs on his whole body started to rise at this moment. Behind it, a faint cover shrouded down, accompanied by that terrifying, beast-like ferocious aura. Even as Admiral, he felt suffocated at this moment. What are you going to do? Sakazuki. A deep voice sounded, and at the same time, there was a cold and angry emotion in his heart. What? Of course the arrest of Pluton Rayleigh. You don't want to stop me, do you? Zhonglu. Akainu said in a deep voice, turning her back to the man behind her. His heart was also on guard, and he knew very well that even though they were both in the Marine camp, the relationship between the two sides was definitely not as harmonious as that between colleagues. Silence. Dead silence. After half an hour. Call. Zhonglu's nostrils spewed 2 white breaths, and the light in his eyes was also icy, cold to ultimate. Roll. An icy voice came out, followed by a majestic force that slammed down on Akainu's head. Chapter 143 Ha 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 ha. Buzz. In an instant, Akainu felt that his head was smashed with a hammer, and Venus shot straight up in front of him. At the same time, the balance of the body is rapidly lost. Immediately afterwards, the ground kept getting closer and closer, and with a bang, his face made an intimate contact with the soil. Crack. The sound of the tremor soared into the sky, and the ground quickly split open. With Akainu's head as the center, it spread to the surroundings, and a huge deep pit appeared. The body below the neck is all leaning back, and the head has been deeply embedded in the soil. Whirring whirring. The wind blew in, blowing the dust off the ground. The scene was silent, and no other sound came out. Whether it is Rayleigh, or Aokiji standing not far away, the two admiral of Kizaru. At this moment, they were all silent. No one would have thought that Zhonglu's shot would be so decisive, direct and unscrupulous. I will not tolerate anyone interfering with my fight. Zhonglu looked cold and said coldly. No one. Sen Leng's voice made everyone around shudder. It's terrifying. Zon Taomaru swallowed, and the hand holding the telescope was shaking. Even for his own battle, together with Marine's admiral, he did not hesitate to take action. Such a man has absolutely no taboos, and his actions are even more unscrupulous and indulgent. Go on, the battle between us. Zhonglu looked up at Rayleigh and said in a deep voice. It is good. Eyes flickered slightly. Rayleigh nodded, holding the knife in his right hand, and his spirit was condensed again. The next second, the two of them moved again. In front of everyone, there seemed to be 2 rays of light, moving rapidly, colliding fiercely, and then bursting into the sky. Boom boom boom. Keep colliding, keep separating, and collide fiercely again. Pieces of dust waves stirred up on the ground, and the violent airflow radiated toward the surroundings. Their figures flickered, moved, and collided constantly. Suddenly, where Akainu was before, the soil trembled, followed by a bang, the magma erupted, and the scorching temperature burned the soil on the ground into magma. Zhonglu. An angry roar came out, the magma surged, quickly forming a human-shaped body, and Akainu appeared again. His eyes stared at the 2 people who were fighting fiercely in front of him. Let's just watch the battle here quietly. Sakazuki. Aokiji came over and said in a deep voice. This battle should be of great significance to them. Akainu looked sharp. Aokiji. Advertisement. I also agree with Kuzan's point, this battle, we probably shouldn't intervene. And, isn't it a pretty good thing to be able to settle a legendary figure among pirates without taking action? After a pause, Kizaru stared at the 2 fighting on the field. Winning and losing will soon be decided. As soon as these words came out, the 3 of them all looked serious and looked at the battle in the field. The figures are staggered, the light and shadow fill the sky, and the fierce collision drives the wind. But the situation of the battle on the field is already obvious. Pluton Rayleigh, lose, Aokiji said solemnly. Yes, the figure holding the long knife, although still fast, still has a keen response, and the attack force is still strong, firmly resisting Zhonglu, who was attacking frantically. However, at this moment, his highly condensed spirit was burning with the brilliance of life. Puff. Every time he swung his sword, he vomited blood. Happy. But even though his body was already looking extremely tragic, his clothes were soaked with blood, and the scars were all over his body, his eyes were still bright. What a bloody battle. Rayleigh laughed. The battle of Ultimate, the experience of Ultimate, made this One Piece's deputy also feel this way at the moment. Zhonglu didn't say a word. He changed his shape and attacked from all angles. Every punch, every kick, carries with it all the strength. Tempest kick, Ben Tiger. With a few flickering figures, Zhonglu came to the top of Rayleigh's head again and slashed down. The latter raised the knife to resist, and with a bang, the surrounding ground rolled up like undulating waves. Puff. Another mouthful of blood spewed out, and Rayleigh's knees sank to the ground. His eyes dimmed for a moment, but then became brighter again, and he swung the knife to his side again. Boom. The sound of the impact sounded, and Rayleigh trembled, and was knocked hundreds of meters to one side by a powerful force, causing large ripples. When he stopped, he spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood in succession, and his face was already a fiasco. It's the limit. Under the high-intensity battle, this aging body finally reached its limit. Today, he is completely relying on his will to persevere and support. But even so, there are still limits. Zhang Lu. Muttering the name, Rayleigh laughed. Ha 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 ha. Zhang Lu, I'm really looking forward to it. What will you do next? What will this world usher in? At this moment, he seemed to vaguely understand the other party's purpose. Advertisement. Bring it on. Final blow. My era, it's time to end. The long knife shook, and Rayleigh's eyes were so bright that he stared at Zhang Lu in front of him. Bury this here and leave the seeds for a new era. I, Rayleigh, have done a profound thing too. When the words fell, he looked serious again and shouted sharply. That kid has great potential. Maybe he will decide the future of the world. Zhang Lu, I know you are very strong, and even in this battle, you haven't used your full strength yet. However, I implore you to give the seeds of these times some space for them to grow. Hearing this, Zhang Lu stepped forward, his face slightly condensed. So much hope, but how can you know what I want to do? He said softly, his figure suddenly pulled, and he was in front of Rayleigh. A mere newcomer. I have no interest in them. Stepping on the ground with both feet, Zhang Lu jumped up, and a tiger-shaped vigor appeared above his fists. Day Tiger. God Rush. Conquerors, armed color, wrapped around his arms at this moment, turned into purple-gold flames, and merged into flaming tiger-shaped waves. The next second, Zhang Lu, like a bomb that fell from the sky, whistled down and bombarded Rayleigh heavily. A huge air wave rushed out, and blood burst out from both of them. Call out. Puff. Aokiji exhaled slowly and looked at the two figures standing facing each other in the field. After a few breaths, a loud laugh resounded through the Sabaody archipelago. At this moment, Rayleigh, as if possessed by Roger, appeared behind him again, holding a knife in both hands, merging with his figure, and swinging the knife at the same time. Ha 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 ha. Happy. Out of nothingness, a sharp light emerged, then twisted, flashed, and hit Zhang Lu. It was at this moment that the long knife in Rayleigh's hand suddenly swung out. The blood splashed and fell on the ground, and the two bodies shook at the same time. God avoid. See you again. A legend has fallen. Gradually, the sound dissipated, and everything became calm again. Zhang Lu's fist hit Rayleigh, and Rayleigh's long knife also slashed at him. Boom. Ended. God avoid. Chapter 144 Start action. The sky of Sabaody archipelago, at some point, became calm. The rainstorm disappeared, and a rainbow hung in the air. The breeze blew past, rolling up the dust on the ground, and a ray of sunlight shone down. The atmosphere that seemed dark and depressing just a moment ago has now become quiet. The battle between the two world-class legends stopped. Their bodies stood quietly in the field, as if looking at each other, no one moved. The people who were watching nearby were also standing there. Everything seems to have become calm, and there is no longer the shock of the previous storm and the continuous impact of the air waves. But the atmosphere in the air at this time is even more serious, and the heart is depressed. The two people in the field did not move, but one of them could no longer move. On the other's body, a long and narrow bloodstain was visible to the naked eye, and the blood was flowing slowly along the body. Pluton Rayleigh, Kizaru murmured. Although he is an enemy, it does not hinder the admiration that surged in his heart at this moment. Even though he died, his body still stood upright, standing quietly in the field, facing his opponent face to face. Even, the eyes are still open, looking into the distance. Ended. Aokiji sighed, and he looked up at the sky. The dense dark clouds have long since dissipated with the wind, and the climate of Sabaody has returned to its original appearance. Wonderful World War. Zhang Lu Admiral has the final victory. Zon Taomaru exclaimed. Compared to 11 Supernova, Monkey D. Luffy beat Celestial Dragons, nothing compares to this war. In the block far away from here, Marines looked suspicious, watching the restored weather and sky, feeling the depression in their hearts, and the suffocation receded like a tide. Finished. Who won this war? Pluton Rayleigh, or Zhang Lu Admiral? The sun is pouring down, reflecting on the stagnant water in the street, emitting colorful rays of light, and the rainbow hangs high in the sky, which is a beautiful and inconceivable object. Go and see. Vice Admiral, headed by him, took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. As a result, the Marine elite team strode towards the place where the battlefield is located. At the same time, the number 5, who had been silently observing the battle, also took a deep breath. It's time for the mission. Have you managed the route that Corazon will leave? Advertisement. Rob Lucci said in a deep voice, the momentum on his body also became condensed at this moment. He's ready to pick us up. As long as the body is successfully collected, you can follow his arrangement and leave the Sabaody archipelago immediately. Then join up with the other numberers. Kaku said. It is good. When the one leaves the target, I will act immediately. Rob Lucci said. Can you do it alone? Kaku worried. Now they are not far in front of them, but there are 3 Admiral, this kind of pressure is quite big. If one is not good, the 2 will be arrested. Rest assured. A smile appeared on the corner of Rob Lucci's mouth, and he said after a pause. You don't know anything about the power given to the numbered person, Kaku. Kaku was stunned for a moment, and then he saw the opponent walking towards the field. Taking a deep breath, Kaku hid behind the broken wall, staring at the figure who was leaving quickly. Then let me see your current strength. After being awarded the number, they will also be entrusted with the enhancement and transmission of various powers on the body. For example, the legendary Golden Lion, the Great Pirate, recovered his legs and healed his injuries. Another example is Enel Master's new skill, which can eject a coin and cause a huge electric explosion. But the power of Rob Lucci's master is unknown to the CP9 team, because he has never shown it from beginning to end. In the center of the battlefield, Zhonglu suddenly took a breath. He stared in front of him, with a smile on his face. Rayleigh, who seemed to have no problems, knew in his heart that the opponent was overloaded with fighting. Burning the spiritual will, burning the vitality, now the oil is exhausted, and the last hope of survival has been lost. It's over. With a slight sigh, Zhonglu moved, an inexplicable force swept through his body, the long and narrow bloodstains disappeared, and the state of the entire body returned to its peak again. Then, after hesitating for a moment, he raised his hand and patted the other's shoulder. The power fluctuated, and Rayleigh's pupils, which seemed to have lost their luster at that moment, seemed to flash a ray of light at this moment. Turning around, Zhonglu walked towards the place where the three admirals were. Nice job, Zhonglu Admiral. Pluton Rayleigh, one of the legendary legends, was defeated by you today. Advertisement. If the Whitebeard Pirates know this news, there will be more pressure. Kizaru said with a smile. Akainu and Aokiji's eyes flashed slightly, and they glanced at Rayleigh, who was still standing in the field in the distance. With their keen observation, they naturally felt that the breath of life on Rayleigh had disappeared. This also means that the deputy of One Piece Roger, Rayleigh, who is known as Pluton by the world, has passed away. As respect for the opponent, treat his body well. Zhonglu said in a deep voice. It's natural. Although it is a hostile faction, an enemy like Pluton Rayleigh is also worthy of our Marine's respect. Kizaru nodded. He lost to his old age. If he was younger, it wouldn't end so quickly. Aokiji sighed. This battle made him feel complicated. Even if the strength of the once famous powerhouse has reached the peak, it will not be able to support it because of age. So, what will happen when he gets old? Perhaps, yes. Zhonglu looked up, glanced at Aokiji, and smiled. 8 inner gates, the 7th gate is fully open, although powerful, it is not all of his strength. Only when the 8 gates are open together is the most powerful moment when all his powers are fully blossomed. Just in that state, the consumption of one's own body's vitality and physical strength will also increase exponentially. In an easy situation, he is unwilling to use it. This kind of dregs on the sea is also used to collect corpses. I set him on fire, and it's counted as cremation for him. Just then, Akainu spoke up. Not only did he say it, but he really did it, and walked towards Rayleigh's corpse who was still standing there. This scene caused Kizaru and Aokiji to change color slightly. Sakazuki. Zhonglu looked gloomy and shouted loudly. Are you going to stop me again? I was just careless just now. If you want to fight me again here, I don't mind. Akainu turned his back to Zhonglu and said coldly. The hostility between the two has been undisguised. In the blink of an eye, Akainu was already in front of Rayleigh, his right arm was raised, lava surged, and he was about to shoot. But at this moment, the eyes of everyone in the field suddenly shrank, and they all stared at the other side. A figure with a black robe covering its entire body and wearing a grimace mask came towards here at an extremely fast speed, and even swept out a white wave from the ground. Chapter 145 The Mysterious Man Who Rivals Admiral. Oh. Kizaru blinked, and a flash of light flashed across his sunglasses. Aokiji's expression condensed slightly, and he looked at the black-robed figure flying over. But they didn't pay much attention to the arrival of this figure, because Akainu was standing in front of Rayleigh at this moment. No matter what kind of enemy, an admiral is enough to settle it. Akainu thought the same way, so he didn't care about the mysterious figure that was approaching him at high speed. Gu dong dong. The magma stirred, the temperature in the air rose, and the fist-shaped magma suddenly rushed out towards the place where Rayleigh stood. At this moment, the black-robed figure that was still several dozen meters suddenly flickered and disappeared in place. What? Kizaru. Aokiji was startled, his eyes dignified. The next second, the figure in black robe appeared, blocking the front of Rayleigh and Akainu, raised his right foot and kicked it fiercely. Boom. A circle of ripples rippled out, and the air waves rolled. The huge magma fist was actually firmly blocked, and the huge force even shattered the magma fist and turned it into countless sparks whizzing away in all directions. Who are you? The sparks radiated in all directions, and Akainu's eyes became cold, staring at the mysterious man in black robe with a grimace in front of him. You don't have to ask. The mysterious man spoke coldly. At this moment, the aura on his body was no less than Admiral's. What do you want to do? He is dead, Akainu asked in a deep voice again. He could faintly feel the powerful power emanating from the opponent's body. Obviously, this guy is a master. Dare to appear in front of me at this moment, it must not be ordinary people. I'll collect the corpse, the mysterious man replied. Akainu was startled. Collect the corpse. But the other party didn't wait for him to ask any more questions. He grabbed Rayleigh's body, turned his head and walked away. His figure flashed, he was already dozens of meters away, and if he flashed again, he would quickly leave here. If you let you leave like this, it will make me seem so incompetent. Akainu said coldly. The magma in his body stirred again, and he punched Lucci's back again. Call out. The hot magma roared out like a meteorite, heading straight for the mysterious man. However, Just as the magma was about to hit, the man seemed to have foreseen it in advance, turned around suddenly, and kicked it out. Advertisement. Boom. The hot magma was directly kicked to pieces and fell down again. And that mysterious man, the clothes kakuzu on his legs were not damaged. Akainu's expression darkened. In a short period of time, the man had already reached a kilometer away, and the speed was astonishingly fast. Pluton Rayleigh's body can't be taken away by someone who hides its head and shows its tail. Kizaru also spoke at this time. The golden light on his body shone, and the next second he rushed from the ground to the sky, chasing after the mysterious man. Zhonglu watched this scene with calm eyes and no reaction at all. Aokiji looked thoughtful, and suddenly said, Pluton Rayleigh is dead, who is the person who is going to take his body? How could I know? Zhonglu said lightly. Aokiji was silent, and then Kaido. Maybe, it's his former friend, or it may be the remnant of the Roger Pirates. Otherwise, other people would not have the motive to take action at this time. Zhonglu didn't respond, but looked up at the sky, the rapidly flashing golden light. With Kizaru's speed, it is natural to be able to catch up with the mysterious man. However, just as Kizaru was about to catch up with the opponent, a blue thunder pillar shot out suddenly, appeared from an unknown direction, and slammed heavily on Kizaru's body. Boom. Kizaru's body, which was flashing with golden light, was instantly hit by the thunder column, then drew an arc, hit the ground heavily, and exploded a large flame. Anyone else? Aokiji was stunned for a moment, his face became solemn, and he stared at the place where the thunder light came from. Lightning. Akainu also looked up suddenly. In the firelight where the explosion occurred, the golden light shone again, and Kizaru stepped out, scratching the back of his head with his right hand. It's terrible, I was almost killed. His eyes narrowed slightly, Kizaru looked at the place where the thunder light flew, and his expression was also solemn. In a moment of delay, the mysterious man who stole Rayleigh's body had disappeared, and he could no longer capture his breath. An unexpected surprise. That kind of lightning intensity, is it also Logia? Kizaru muttered. Looking at Rayleigh's body, it was robbed, and two powerful mysterious men appeared. The three admirals who gathered together again all seemed a little silent. It's just a corpse, it doesn't really matter. Kizaru smiled and said again. Compared to this matter, the news of Zhonglu Admiral's defeat of Pluton Rayleigh will soon spread all over the world. Reputation will be greatly enhanced again. Zhonglu smiled lightly. Then borrow your auspicious words, Pulsalino. Advertisement. Hey. You are too kind. I just don't know, what do you think of the two mysterious people who appeared just now? Being able to withstand Sakazuki's attack, and also stopping me. Not ordinary people. Kizaru smiled. Zhonglu shook his head. I can't see anything for now. Between the four of them, there really wasn't much to talk about. After a while, they dispersed one after another. A few hours later, Naval Headquarters, in Marineford. Has Pluton Rayleigh been resolved? Sengoku, who had just arrived at the office, saw three Admiral. Yes, a battle that burns life and spirit, facing an undead monster like Zhonglu, even Pluton Rayleigh. After a pause, Kizaru sighed. It's normal to end up like this. At this time, Akainu spoke again in a deep voice. It's just that the two who stole Rayleigh's body still need attention. Their strength is definitely not weak. Hearing this, Sengoku's expression became solemn. A guy who can grab something in Admiral's hands, of course, is unusual. What's more, one of them even showed the characteristics of Logia Thunder Fruit. Thunder Fruit, one of the most powerful fruits of Logia's attack, what kind of person actually got this fruit? He muttered. Who knows? Aokiji shrugged and replied lazily. Meanwhile, Sabaody Island, a secluded coast. Get out of here. Corazon pointed to the boat leaning on the shore, and glanced at the big box in the hands of the two men, his eyes were full of surprise. He had just seen clearly that the trunk contained an old man and, unsurprisingly, Pluton Rayleigh. They even snatched the legendary one-piece deputy and put it in a box, how dare they? Then, thank you very much. When we get to the sea, our people will meet you. Farewell now, Rob Lucci said aloud. Then he turned to board, Kaku paddled, and the boat quickly departed. Is this all arranged by Zhonglu uncle? It's audacious and puzzling. Corazon watched the boat and sighed softly. Chapter 146. What are you doing? The boat made ripples on the sea, neither fast nor slow. Rob Lucci sat on the box, Kaku rowed quietly, neither made any sound nor communicated. An hour later, when the boat was on target, Kaku let go of the oars, threw it aside, and looked up at the sky. Have they not arrived yet? Lucci nodded. It seems so. We are early. It shouldn't be. When Kizaru moved, that thunder light was sent by Enel, right? Kaku said. Yes, it's him. Luke rowed. By the way, is Pluton Rayleigh still alive? Kaku asked curiously again. It was originally dead, but after I rescued him, I don't know why, there is a breath. Current state. After a pause, Lucci said solemnly. It's a serious injury, but in the end, it's impossible to say for sure. Kaku's face showed an expression of amazement. It's still alive. Just as he was talking, a shadow suddenly shrouded his head. The two looked up, and a large golden ship flew fast, with electric lights flashing all over their body, and soon reached the top of their heads. Arrive. Rob Lucci stood up and slung the box on his shoulders. Then, his knees were slightly bent and he suddenly jumped up. His feet stomped in the air, and he hurried towards the golden ship above his head. At this time, the atmosphere on the Ark Proverbs was also strange. Enel's face was cold as he stared at the man with 3 knives and green hair on his head, his eyes flashing. He didn't know why, but this guy suddenly appeared on his boat. What made him even more difficult was that after telling Zhonglu, he was not allowed to take action. Instead, he wanted to keep this green algae-headed boy on the boat. Enel. Rornoa Zoro was shocked, and looked nervously at the man standing in front of him. He did not expect that after being slapped by Bartholomew Bear, he did not die, but left Sabaody archipelago. The bubble took him a long way from the land of Sabaody, then shattered with a snap and landed on the massive golden ship. The moment I opened my eyes, I saw this familiar guy in front of me. The relationship between the two is definitely an enemy rather than a friend, and the scene of him falling under the opponent's hands on Sky Island is even more vivid. Why are you here? Zoro asked loudly. Behind him, the silver fox Foxy blinked, staring at the green algae head in front of him. A mere mortal, what qualifications do you have to ask this god? Enel said coldly. Get me out of here. Zoro took a deep breath and said loudly. Advertisement. Impossible. Enel refused outright. The two had just fought, and the ending was obvious. Zoro's body was pitch black at this time, and he had already passed out 3 times. The blow of high-voltage lightning is not something that everyone can withstand. Damn, what are you doing? Zoro asked through gritted teeth. He also knew the ship under his feet. It was the Proverbs that Sky Island had seen. Now it was obviously very mature and could easily float above the sky and fly. If you want to leave here, you need to wait for the boat to stop on the ground before you have a chance. What's even more outrageous is that in front of him, turned out to be his former enemy. Someone wants you to stay. Otherwise, do you think you can still live to talk to me now? Enel said coldly. At this moment, on the side of the ship, the airflow oscillated, and the 2 figures fell one after another. Rob Lucci put the box on the deck. It seems that your mission has been completed, number 5. Enel didn't want to pay attention to Zoro anymore, turned to look at Lucci in black robe, and asked with a smile. Well, thanks to your shot. Otherwise, facing Admiral, if you want to leave, it's not that easy. Luke said. Then, he looked to the side, and his eyes narrowed when he saw Zoro. Rornoa Zoro. Why is he here? When he saw No. 5, Zoro was also shocked. You are, the 2 guys at the auction. He had noticed these 2 people before, hiding in a corner, looking very mysterious. Who are you? Damn, who the hell are you? Zoro's heart was in a mess and he couldn't understand that there would be Enel and strange mysterious people on this ship. I was even more puzzled when you appeared on our ship. Rornoa Zoro. Rob Lucci said lightly and took off the mask on his face. The same is true for Kaku next to him, staring at Zoro with undisguised hostility. It's you. After seeing the faces of the 2, Zoro's body trembled and his eyes narrowed. He felt that these 2 guys were inexplicably familiar, but he did not expect that they were his former enemies. At this moment, Zoro's heart sank to a low point. In front of him, he met the unmatched Admiral. He thought he had escaped, but he met his former mortal enemy. A mortal situation. Zoro sighed in his heart, despairing. Advertisement. I don't know, he appeared here inexplicably. I originally wanted to kill him directly, but the boss wouldn't let him. Enel shook his head. Yes. Rob Lucci froze slightly. But soon, his face was as usual, and he opened the box in front of him again, revealing Pluton Rayleigh lying there, motionless, only his eyes were turning. Is this your mission this time? He seems to be alive. Enel probed curiously. The old man was indeed dead. But it came to life again, but now, it's just a sigh of relief. What surprised them even more was that the old man lying in the box actually opened his mouth. Rob Lucci dragged it out of the box. Maybe he saved you. Probably. That guy's actions are really incomprehensible. Rayleigh sighed softly, looking complicated. He knew very well that he was really dead at that moment. But for some reason, he came back to life. Mr. Rayleigh. Zoro's eyes widened at this moment, looking at the old man who was taken out of the box, and exclaimed in shock. So you're not dead. Rayleigh was also taken aback when he saw Zoro. He also thought that the Straw Hats and his gang were already in the hands of the bear. With a flash in his eyes, he suddenly understood and smiled. It seems that you and your companions have escaped perfectly. That guy saved your life. At this time, Rob Lucci spoke slowly. Either Mr. Rayleigh or Rornoa Zoro. Next, please stay on this ship. After a pause, his eyes were slightly cold. If you want to leave, we only have to take action to leave you behind. That would be troublesome. Rayleigh smiled, feeling his physical state. Even if the old man wants to leave, he is powerless. Although I don't know what you want to do. But in the end, it took a life. Zoro's eyes flickered, staring at the 2 enemies in front of him. Even Pluton Rayleigh, such a powerful figure, was actually caught on this ship. What are these guys going to do? Chapter 147 give you another chance to choose. On the Ark Proverbs, the atmosphere seemed a little weird. With only 1 breath left, Rayleigh was covered in injuries. The battle with Zhonglu caused almost all the bones in his body to shatter, and his body was severely injured. It's enough strength to be able to speak barely. At this time, he looked at the other people on the boat and said nothing. With his perception, he could naturally perceive the man in the black robe, the man with the pigeon on his shoulders, and the man with long earlobes in front of him. The gang suddenly appeared and snatched themselves from Marine Admiral's men. It's not clear what the purpose is, but apparently this behavior was ordered by someone. In addition, the young swordsman from the Straw Hat Pirates also came here. What is the reason? A hint of doubt appeared in Rayleigh's heart. To gather such power, who is behind it? Dorag. In terms of strength and power, there are indeed many masters under the Revolutionary Army, and it is possible to do such a thing. Just then, Rob Lucci called the phone bug. Blue blue blue. After a while, the phone worm connected. Mission completed. Rob Lucci said in a deep voice to the phone bug. Wait at the original location, I'll come over later. The deep voice sounded, causing both Rayleigh and Zoro on the boat to widen their eyes. What is this voice? Zoro was stunned and exclaimed in shock. Rayleigh's pupils contracted as well, but soon a smile appeared on his face. I really can't guess that guy. That's right, the voice from the phone bug was the Zhonglu they were familiar with. The Arc Proverbs, under the control of Enel, drove towards the predetermined location. Collecting the body of Pluton Rayleigh was the decision of Zhonglu. Meanwhile, Sabaody Archipelago. Sir, you just fought Pluton Rayleigh, shouldn't you rest now? Where are you going? Freya, who was by her side, put on new clothes for Zhonglu and asked in confusion. Some personal matters need to be dealt with. Zhonglu said with a smile. Don't worry about me, my state is always at its peak. Freya was speechless. Then go back early, I will wait for you at the headquarters. The matter of Sabaody Archipelago should have been dealt with. A big man like Pluton Rayleigh was killed by you. This matter will soon spread all over the world and cause a huge sensation. Advertisement. Zhonglu smiled. Maybe. Then, he turned and left, waving his hand. Then, Freya, see you at the headquarters. Seeing her own boss, without taking any means of transportation, dashing all the way from the sea and disappearing in the blink of an eye, Freya blinked and muttered. What a weird guy. A moment later, in the southwest of Sabaody, on a small island called Chiange, the golden ship slowly docked at the port. Is this the secret base you built? Enel's heart network covers the entire island, and immediately sees the simple base that has been built. I also saw number 2, who was sitting in the seat with Erlang's legs crossed, lighting a cigar, and waiting for something silently. After they jumped off the boat, number 2 looked up slightly and looked towards the port. Yes, the geographical location of this island is relatively suitable, and it can be built as a temporary base. After a pause, Lucci said again. Of course, after entering New World, we will consider continuing to build another base. Enel smiled. I heard that New World is a wider and stronger world. I'm also looking forward to it. Luke rowed. They stood at the port waiting, Rayleigh and Zoro, both silent, also waiting for the familiar person. Half an hour later, on the sea ahead, a white wave swept up, quickly stretched towards here, and hit it. Coming. This way of sailing, only he can use it. Enel laughed. Luke nodded. In the white waves, a figure is running fast, and in the blink of an eye, it can be seen clearly, revealing the figure. Trouble everyone. Along with the laughter, Zhonglu's feet had also landed on the shore and came before everyone. After glancing around, his eyes were fixed on Rayleigh. I thought you couldn't stand it. Rayleigh's face was pale, and when he heard the words, he forced a smile. I would like to thank you for your means, which left me with one breath. I thought I was going to say goodbye to this world. Zhonglu grinned and stared at each other. For an old guy like you, if one dies, there will be one less. If you really leave, it will make the world less fun. Rayleigh looked thoughtful, and then said solemnly, tell me, what are you going to do? Or, what do you need me to do? Zhonglu smiled and shook his head. I don't need help from an old guy like you for what Zhonglu has to do. After a pause, he laughed again. Advertisement. Let you live. I just want to make this world more exciting. Rayleigh was slightly startled. Really? That's all. That's all. Zhonglu nodded. Then he stepped forward, took a few steps to Rayleigh, stretched out his right hand, and pressed it on his shoulder. Buzz. An inexplicable force swept through, and Rayleigh was shocked. The internal injuries in his body were dispelled, and the injuries on his body also dissipated. In an instant, the whole person returned to the original state in the blink of an eye. Slowly standing up, Rayleigh tried to stretch his body, and found that his injury had actually recovered, and couldn't help exclaiming. With such an ability, I really don't know who can beat you. Zhonglu smiled, with a look of anticipation in his eyes. Maybe Whitebeard can. That man. When Rayleigh heard the words, he was slightly startled, and then sighed. Even if he is old, if it is his words, he may really be able to fight with you. That's why I'm looking forward to this battle. Zhonglu laughed. Is that why you're still in the marine now? Asked Rayleigh. It's not just that, I also need the stage set up by this unprecedented scale of war to announce something to the world. Zhonglu smiled lightly. I see. Rayleigh glanced at Enel and Rob Lucci. The virtual night 20 years ago has made a comeback again. After Zhonglu smiled, he looked at Zoro again. The bear sent you to me, it's really a fateful reunion. Then, Roronoa Zoro, I'll ask you again. I want to leave my men, meet your companions again, and experience weakness and despair again in the future. The helplessness of watching my companions die, unable to save them. You still have to worship me as a teacher. Under my teaching, you will become stronger. Finally became. After a pause, Zhonglu's voice was low and powerful. The world's greatest swordsman. Zoro was shocked, staring at the man in front of him. Chapter 148 I want to be the number one in the world. This man's suggestion was really tempting. But at this moment, Zoro was also very worried about his companions. In the chaotic situation of Sabaody Archipelago, no one knew what happened to the others and whether they were in danger.
With your strength, if you want to gain a foothold in this world, it is indeed a little bit worse. Young swordsman. Rayleigh shook his head slightly. Being able to worship under Zhonglu and learn swordsmanship is definitely the best choice in this world. Because, in addition to the titles of the strongest admiral, the indestructible monster, etc., this guy also has the attribute of being a good teacher. His former subordinates were all taught to be the strongest in the world. Hearing the old man speak, Zoro hesitated even more, but...
Are you worried about your companions? Although I don't know where the bears sent them, since you're fine, everyone else should be safe. Rayleigh said with a smile. It's really unexpected, that Shichibukai is actually walking with you. Zhonglu also spoke at this time. Bartholomew Shong, a member of the Revolutionary Army. As that's so, no wonder that guy helps Straw Hat Crew. Rayleigh came to a realization. Thinking of the appearance of Dorag, he finally knew that the appearance of the bear from the very beginning was to send the Straw Hat Boy and others away from the dangerous Uzumaki of Sabaody Archipelago. So you, too, are helping Straw Hat Crew. Squinting, Rayleigh asked again with a smile. I have an old relationship with Garp. Zhonglu didn't explain much. But such words, already a good answer, made Rayleigh laugh again. Being under Zhonglu's hands, after training, I became stronger. You can help your companions more in the future. Otherwise, with your current strength, you won't be able to go far. The huge sea area of New World is even more dangerous than it is now. Rayleigh said in a deep voice, looking complicated, as if recalling something. In the adventure that is still fresh in his memory, even a person as strong as Roger has faced a very complicated situation. It can be said that without strength, it is impossible to gain a foothold on the road of hegemony. Yes, Zoro muttered. In the end, as if he had made up his mind, he slammed on his knees and pressed his forehead to the ground. Please accept me as a disciple and teach swordsmanship. Taking a deep breath, Zoro roared. I want to be stronger. I want to be number one in the world. Advertisement. Forever, forever, forever. The voice was mixed with trembling, excitement and tears. I don't want to see my companions disappear in front of me again. Yes, the companions who get along with each other day and night, just disappeared in front of his eyes, like broken bubbles, making people desperate, fearful, and trembling. He never wanted to experience that feeling again. Looking at the man kneeling in front of him, Zhonglu sighed softly. I can feel your surging ambition deep inside you, but also your fear and your burning affection for your partner. So, Roronoa Zoro, I will accept you as a disciple. Teach you to be the world's greatest swordsman. When the words came out, Zoro trembled violently, with his forehead on the ground, and shouted loudly, Thank you, master. Get up. Zhonglu laughed. Zoro stood up slowly, still a little excited. Apprenticeship is not a joke, it means a lot. And worshipping the man in front of him as his teacher was a complicated thing for him. Because, the name of the world's largest swordsman now hangs on the opponent's body. This also means that in the future, only by defeating the opponent can you become the number one in the world. I know you used to practice at Koshiro's dojo. When Zhonglu's words came, Zoro was startled. Koshiro's swordsmanship, although there is some Taoism, is not enough. As your enlightenment, it's not bad, but you can't rely on yourself to comprehend the deeper places. Zoro listened quietly. I will make your swordsmanship go to the next level in the next time. Having said that, Zhonglu suddenly smiled. Your captain, Monkey D. Luffy's dream, is One Piece. Then, it's not bad for you to be the number one swordsman in the world. Zoro was shocked and nodded heavily. Yes. That's exactly my goal. Before that, though, I need to deal with a big event. You will live here temporarily. Zhonglu laughed again. I guided you when you were in the Sabaody Archipelago, and during this period of time, I had a good understanding of what it was like at that time. Zoro nodded. He naturally knew that the feeling at that time was enough for him to comprehend for a long time. If you can comprehend it, your strength will be raised to a new level in all directions. Then, everyone walked towards the island. Rayleigh was free to leave at will, but he was clearly interested in being here too. Advertisement. To transform a deserted island into such a base, Zhonglu, your ambition is not small. When he saw the depths of the island, buildings, and people coming and going, he said softly. This kind of thing, I wanted to do it 20 years ago. Zhonglu said solemnly. Number 2, who was wearing a black robe, also walked out with a cigar hanging at this time. Yo, I brought back an acquaintance. Crocodile looked at Zoro and said with a faint smile. Now, when he sees his former opponent, his mood is also unusually calm. His own strength has already risen to a level. When you reach a certain height and look at your former opponents, some will only have a feeling of looking down, without any anger. Even Crocodile felt a little funny at this time. Shichibukai, Crocodile. You, aren't you? Zoro looked stunned when he saw the other party. He was originally an impel down, but he was rescued by me. Zhonglu explained with a smile. Number 2, he is my disciple and will stay with you for the time being. After a pause, he smiled again. Death is not dead. Hearing this, Crocodile fell silent, then grinned and exhaled a puff of smoke. Zhonglu laughed again. Don't let me down. Whether it is Crocodile, Enel, or Rob Lucci, in his perception, it is no trivial matter. You can take action against him, which is also a kind of training. Rayleigh listened silently, but his heart was silent for the young swordsman next to him. I understand. In his opinion, this guy can't even stand a thunderbolt and is not worthy of being his opponent at all. Kaku, who was beside Rob Lucci, also smiled. Rorno Azoro, it seems that we will be able to fight a second match soon. But the beating is probably indispensable. But don't overdo it. Enel tilted his head, stared at Zoro for a moment, and finally cut. Hearing this, Zoro took a deep breath. Definitely not. Of course, I know that he has some small grudges with some of you. Zoro, before I teach you, these guys can be regarded as the first training for you. Chapter 149. It's time to go. The big event of Sabaody Archipelago cannot be hidden after all. Marine did not intend to hide it, so in just 2 or 3 days, it has spread all over the world. One Piece Roger's deputy captain, known as Pluden Rayleigh, was defeated in a battle between Sabaody Archipelago and Marine's predecessor, Admiral Zhang Lu, and died on the spot. I can't imagine that such a legendary character fell down. But, who is the Day Tiger Zhang Lu? Yes, Pluden Rayleigh. Many people know that although Roger has been dead for 20 years, his reputation can be said that the world knows everything and is extremely loud. However, the Marine who defeated him is little known. It's strange, how can the man who can beat Pluden Rayleigh remain anonymous? Soon after, Zhang Lu's past was turned out. Then, the world was shocked. Shocked. There is such a powerful admiral in the Marine. Zhang Lu. It's the dream and romance that men admire most. It's too powerful. He once chased the Roger pirates all over the world single-handedly, and fought against Whitebeard, one of the 4 emperors today, several times. What's even more shocking is the great thing he did. No wonder he once disappeared. Such a man is so exciting. There was a lot of discussion all over the world, and as the news of the defeat of Pluden Rayleigh radiated to all over the world, Zhang Lu's name also resounded all over the world. Sabaody Archipelago, Aunt Xiao's rip-off bar. Shaki, who was holding the newspaper in his hand, blinked and looked solemn. You died. That old man of damn it. But how is that possible? When he left, he said he was just going to deal with it. How could it be possible to die like this? Murmuring, 2 lines of tears unknowingly flowed down Shaki's face. That old man, though very damn it, is also an A**** hole. However, after all, she has lived here for decades. How could a guy like you just die like this? Suddenly, Aunt Xiao recalled the news the two had received. Pluden Rayleigh's body, at the last moment, was snatched by an unknown mysterious person. The person who can take food from Admiral's hands is suspected to have Admiral-level combat power. Taking a deep breath, Aunt Xiao's eyes flashed. Yes, certainly not dead. It must not be dead, even if you face the monster Zhang Lu, you shouldn't die. But despite the repeated cheers in her heart, the tears in Aunt Xiao's eyes still flowed out uncontrollably. After all, that battle was against that man. Dong dong dong. Just then, there was a knock on the door of the bar. Aunt Xiao wiped away her tears without raising her head. It's closed. Advertisement. However, the person at the door ignored it and kept knocking on the door. Damn, let me know which B*********** D it is, I will never spare you. Aunt Xiao scolded, strode towards the door, and then pulled the curtains open, scolding when she opened her mouth. However, when he saw the old face at the door, he was stunned. Immediately afterwards, a smile visibly bloomed on her face. I knew it, I knew you weren't dead. I knew you were still alive. Rayleigh looked at the woman in front of him, with red and swollen eyes, and smiled. Go in and talk. Aunt Xiao immediately stepped aside, and after Rayleigh entered, she glanced left and right and closed the door tightly. What happened? Outside, there is news that you are dead. Rayleigh smiled, but his eyes became a little serious and solemn. Originally, I was indeed dead. However, I doubt that Master Zhang Lu has the ability to resurrect the dead. Aunt Xiao's eyes widened. What did you say? He saved me. But that's fine, I can disappear in front of the world forever. Live my old age with peace of mind. Rayleigh poured himself a glass of wine and smiled again. However, that guy Zhang Lu is very mysterious and ambitious. Since he saved you, will he really let you go like this? Aunt Xiao was puzzled. Rayleigh smiled. What purpose and ambition he has, we will naturally find out later. As for whether he will let me go. After a pause, Rayleigh said again. If it's a good thing, I'm naturally willing to help him. But if it's bad, the big deal is to die again. Aunt Xiao was stunned and sighed slightly. At this moment, she even had a feeling deep in her heart. That is, the man Zhang Lu is probably even more terrifying than Roger back then. Meanwhile, New World, aboard the Moby DK. Dad, big news. Marco looked solemn, holding a newspaper in his hand, and walked quickly to Whitebeard, who was sitting on a chair and filled with hanging bottles. Oh, Whitebeard blinked, took the newspaper, glanced down, and his eyes narrowed. Marine, has it been decided that Ace will be executed in front of the world a month later? The voice was low, and the cold, deep majesty in the words also permeated. Advertisement. Obviously, this news made one of the 4 emperors, the strongest man in the world, angry. How are you all getting ready? Looking up, Whitebeard asked again. Brothers are ready, since Marine wants to fight, let them see our power. Father, your combat power will make them fear. Marco said in a deep voice, his eyes sharp. Goo la la la, Whitebeard laughed. You're right, Who does Marine think lousy is? Lousy is Whitebeard. I'll let them know the price of angering me. My son must be rescued too. At this time, Marco said again. In addition, there is another news in the newspaper. Of equal importance. Whitebeard froze for a moment, then lowered his head and continued to scan. When he saw it, his eyes were shocked. Pluton Rayleigh, lost to Zhonglu. Marco shook his head and said in a low voice, "It's not just failure," the newspaper said, "it's death." Whitebeard was startled, then sighed, looking at the sea in front of him, and laughed again. It seems that it is a very fierce battle. That guy Rayleigh must be happy before he dies. Standing slowly, Whitebeard laughed. Fight that guy Zhonglu. It will definitely make people's blood boil. As long as I think about it, I start to get excited, and the anticipation makes people tremble. Hurrah la la la. Deafening laughter spread throughout the Moby DK. It also attracted the other people on the boat to turn back and look here. Dad's state is really good. He's already getting excited, because of the opponent, but that man. Looking forward, this battle will definitely be the most spectacular and exciting one in this era. In the next second, Dad's loud shout came over. Marco, order everyone. Be ready anytime. We should go. Chapter 150 Take off Whitebeard's head. New World. The Whitebeard Pirates, dozens of pirates under its command, all moved after receiving orders from the strongest man in the world. Marine captures Ace, and the consequences will be devastating. This will also represent the war between the two major forces in the current era. One is the Whitebeard Pirates, one of the four emperors, and the other is the Whitebeard Pirates, one of the four emperors. Between the two sides, there are countless masters and powerhouses in the world, and even people's scalps are numb. But with such a huge manpower mobilization and a large-scale war, the preparation procedures and the time spent on the road must be extremely troublesome and long. Therefore, no one will know when the war will break out. But when Marine announced the time for the public execution of Firefist Ace, and the news of Pluton Rayleigh's death, there was a huge uproar in the world. Wanokuni, Ghost Island, blue blue blue. The low-pitched phone bug's message sounded, and after a long wait, someone picked it up. Speak. If there is nothing urgent, Lousy will definitely kill you. Must. The tall, drunken man gritted his teeth and roared. The irritability and killing intent between the words made the pirate opposite the phone bug tremble. Guy, Captain Kaido, something big has happened. Taking a deep breath, the pirate shouted again. It's going crazy outside now. One Piece Roger's vice captain, Pluton Rayleigh, fought against Admiral Zhonglu in Sabaody archipelago and died on the spot. Such words made Kaido's trance spirit suddenly sober up. Well, you mean Pluton Rayleigh? The old man on the Roger ship long gone. That's right, it's him, Pluton Rayleigh. He was killed by Zhonglu at the Sabaody archipelago. The pirate hurriedly shouted. Zhonglu. Kaido muttered the name and didn't respond for a while, but soon he glared. You said Zhonglu. That day Tiger Zhonglu. It's the guy who made a big name in the last era. Damn, isn't that guy dead yet? In an instant, Kaido woke up and his eyes became solemn. In the era when the three legends of Roger, Whitebeard, and Golden Lion unified the sea, on the other hand, there were also three pirates in the marine who became legends. Advertisement. Heroes Vice Admiral Garp, Buddha Sengoku and Day Tiger Zhonglu. Among them, Zhonglu is the youngest, but young does not mean weak, on the contrary, it is extremely powerful. The powerful even makes the pirates of the same era feel desperate. Kaido had never fought against Zhonglu, but he kept listening to the legend until the man disappeared from the world. Call. He took a deep breath, and then spewed it out again. Two white breaths emanated from the void. Kaido's drunkenness had dissipated, replaced by a solemn expression. The Day Tiger Zhonglu. People in the world say that you are unparalleled in combat power, possess the most powerful physique among human beings, and are an undead monster. In a sense, it coincides with the title of Lousy. I'm really looking forward to fighting with you, and see who is stronger between you and me. The words with a little interest in a low voice came out and echoed in the room. Guy, Captain Kaido. At this time, a voice came from the phone bug again. What else? Kaido said coldly. Also, Marine has announced the time to execute Firefist Ace, in just a month. There is news that the Whitebeard Pirates have come out in full force and are ready to attack Naval Headquarters Marineford. The pirate said in a trembling voice again. This trembling from the heart is not only the fear of his own captain, but also the excitement of the upcoming war. A decisive battle between the two great forces in the world. How many thousands of people will participate in this, and how many forces will be attracted? Marine, Shichibukai, four emperors, will all be involved. Simply, it can be called the greatest event of this era. He also believed that Captain Kaido's mood would be the same as his. That old man at Whitebeard. Sure enough, hearing that Kaido's eyes lit up, and his eyes became extremely sharp. I really dare to think about it. Go and storm Marine's camp. However, right after that, the four emperors Kaido of the Beasts did not say anything, but hung up the phone bug. He sat cross-legged and fell silent. He has been in this sea for decades, and his strength, ambition, and means have enabled him to gain the fame he is today, known by the world as Kaido of the Beasts. Similarly, he has the title of being the strongest in the sea, land and air. In a sense, his reputation is even more ferocious than Whitebeard. Advertisement. Whitebeard hadn't shot for a long time, and he was getting old. What he carried on his head was only the reputation accumulated in the old times and over a long period of time. In Kaido's opinion, The old man Whitebeard, with his old body, no longer matches the huge name above his head. Want to commit suicide? Old man. Marine's camp is not so easy to break into. Muttering, Kaido's eyes twinkled. He had fought with Marine many times and was captured several times, and naturally knew Marine's strength, even though he was not killed. But he also suspected that those guys might have moved or experimented on their own bodies. Even he, after going through it a few times, was terrified of Marine. It was even more determined that only by becoming the Pirate King and obtaining the legendary Great Secret Treasure, would it be possible, with confidence, to take action against Marine. Only with an old, scarred body, I want to capture naval headquarters. I have no confidence in you, Whitebeard. Speaking slowly, Kaido suddenly stood up, and his eyes suddenly became sharp. It's better, let me take off your head, superimpose your reputation on me, and let me Kaido become the strongest in this era. Decided, I'm going to shoot you, and I'll cut your head off. It's better to lose to your peers at sea than to throw your old life in Marineford. The voice was getting louder and louder, and the fighting spirit in Kaido's eyes was also getting stronger. He decided to take action against Whitebeard and prevent him from dying. Likewise, as long as he kills him, his reputation will grow stronger. Then, after Whitebeard's death, his territory is leaderless, and the Kaido pirates will also be cheaper, making him the most powerful of the 4 emperors. Come on. Suddenly, Kaido shouted outside. Captain Kaido. Soon, someone walked in. Order the 3 kanbans, really hit, prepare a boat for Lousy. Kaido snorted lowly. Huh, what is Captain Kaido going to do? The pirate asked in confusion. If he remembered correctly, the captain of his own family seemed to be drinking not long ago. Lousy, do something to Whitebeard. Take off his head, Kaido yelled.